So the writer's block is 1 year old.
This could be from anyone.
And to celebrate my first anniversary, I sat down with FilmFlux to talk about our process, my highlights of the year, then his, and the lessons we learned along the way. Lessons that have earned me a mighty, blistering 100 subscribers. Well, thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me, and congratulations on 1 year. You survived.
1 whole year and a full 100 subscribers.
Pew, 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 pew.
It feels big and tiny all at the same time, which is something I never thought I'd say twice. But because I'd noticed about you and me is that we both sort of refuse to put our names or our faces in our videos. So a peek behind the curtain is a rare thing, and I thought, why not when we hit a year? Just a little peek behind the curtain.
Yeah, I think it also gives people like a perspective. I feel like the only currency that matters anymore online is actual people, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? I mean, YouTube sort of becomes like a friendship simulator.
Yeah.
And, you sort of listen to these people sort of talk informally and you sort of go, okay, well, I get why it's successful. But since day one, I was like, I'm not doing that. I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Not on the assumption that no one wants to be my friend, but it's like, I do watch a lot of other YouTubers sometimes and realize that actually probably a lot of effort goes into writing as if they're talking informally. And it's not easy. It's not easy to do that, but I thought that's the only choice a lot of people are making, and I'd rather choose to do something a bit different.
Yeah, I think that's the part why your stuff is so interesting, because I don't know, I always, it's cool to actually be able to talk to you, because like I have so many questions about your process or how you think about things that you can't really convey in an email.
I know, it's weird, isn't it? And whenever I write an email, I was like, I'm writing very formally there. It's a bad habit from being brought up in Britain, I think. It's just don't show emotion. Yeah.
It's kind of the British way. My father was British, so I know how it is.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. What do you know what part of Britain he came from? Luton Airport? Oh my god.
Were you truly wafted here from paradise?
No, Luton Airport.
Actually, yeah, I'd like ask a question or something. Start with that, because that's more interesting than me going, okay, now it's time to talk all about me.
I guess one of my first questions is, what's your process when you come to? So I guess, oh man, this is so hard to start.
I know, tell me about it. That's why I threw it over to you.
So I'm going to just assume that you get an idea for a video, and that's just going to be a given. And now you kind of know what video you want to make. What's your process when it comes to how am I going to approach this video almost thematically? Like,
yeah, or
I noticed you have a very unique, like you structure them differently. It's not like other video essays.
Yeah, well, I kind of like it's like when you listen to like writers or directors talk about the films they do, like very rarely do they say like they love structure. It's almost always I love character or dialogue or both. But it's like hard to fall in love with structure. And for me it's like I actually got my head down and spent a long time learning it and did kind of fall for it. You can do really interesting things by having like acts having different tensions or different tones and pivoting from one to the other and all that stuff. So that's just like every time you decide on how to structure something, it's a choice, and you can do 3 acts or 2 or change it slowly across the whole thing. So that's just like another decision in the process. So like often I'll think, okay, well, what's a visual theme for this thing? Like I often don't use like a default style or anything. And I just make the decision when it comes to the video as to what's appropriate. So structure is one of those things, but generally it's like I always have an idea for a video, and it's got to be two things, and usually it's like a case of finding out what the second thing is. So sometimes I start with like a really kitsch shit take, like a clickbait thing, like, do you know Contagion is like Jaws, man? And it's like, once I've done that, I thought, oh, that's a title, but then I sort of asked myself, why am I fixating on that? And work out what it is I'm really trying to say or interested in talking about. And sometimes it's the other way around. So I'll know I'll want to talk about a general trend or a thing, you know, how movies affect audiences in reality, you know, that would be Contagion's version. And then just like wed the two. So if you can start with a really like populist shtick thing, the sort of clickbait title to get people in, then I'm like, okay, well, what am I trying to talk about? And sometimes I'll know what I want to talk about, but I have no idea what film or book or anything I'm going to use to talk about it. The Khuleshov characters thing was that. I thought for a while, like, how can I like make a video about character? And I was stroking my chin for a long time trying to work that out. And then I realized, oh, well, I was kind of interested in like how faceless characters work, and explaining why they do is the same as explaining how character works. So then you just add them together, and then it makes sense. But sometimes I don't know what the fuck I'm going for. Like King Arthur was that. It's like I'd noticed that all the things that modern pop culture has inherited from him are kind of more popular than King Arthur movies now, because it's in everything else. Right. I thought, well, that's an interesting thing. You go through all the places he pops up. But then I was really asking myself, like, well, why is that interesting? And then the question occurs, like, do people just really love King Arthur? Because I'm not that convinced. I don't think anyone went into Thor going, I really want to make a King Arthur movie, but it's got to be super. I just like, and then I sort of realized, oh, no, we inherit that. We just it sort of passes on like a family genealogy. And I was like, oh, genealogy, that's a good metaphor. And then I did my reading on like Sapiens and stuff like that, and I end up there. So like that's the goal, but sometimes I start with like an idiot's take and then realize I'm being an idiot. And then the other half of the time I'm stroking my chin and trying to be very philosophical, then realize I don't have a good access point for it until I find one. So it could go either way.
It's really interesting.
But the end goal is
it almost sounds like a bait and switch. Your initial prospect is like, oh, this is like a clickbaity title, but what I actually want to talk about is this.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. And like, it feels deliberate half the time, but even like, but I don't want to, you know, give a premise that I wouldn't be interested in anyway. It's like the King Arthur thing really got me interested. I'd like read, you know, The Once and Future King, and I'd just come off like, well, basically the Green Knight trailer came out. I was like, oh wow, this looks incredible. New trailer out recently. I'm loving it, by the way. And then I thought, well, what's like, is there a good Arthurian book out there? And then I found out the guy who like won a fucking Pulitzer Prize, won one for writing a fantasy novel. I was like, that's interesting. Then I read that and I thought, okay. So even like the populist premise thing is something I'm still interested in.
Right.
So I don't want to switch anything out by pretending to be interested in something else. But it's also, if I don't do something deeper, I feel guilty for being like a bit too simple. So it's like the stupid half of my brain and the smarter half of my brain are always like competing and like nudging elbows for room in the video. But I do try and look for a way to like tease one thing and then switch it to make it seem like it's about something else. Because you just got to keep people interested and hopefully do a twist or a surprise or something. It's where the idea of like doing an Amy Jump video, you come from, oh, well, start with the one everyone knows. Yeah, and make it seem like it's going to be a Ben Wheatley video. And then go, actually, no, let's twist it and look at that relationship as well.
Right, yeah. Although it is essentially both at the same time.
Yeah, because they both make the films, but we get to
Yeah.
interrogate their relationship along the way and the historical context for that as well. So my brain's always like trying to add in something a little smarter as I go, and sometimes I find it immediately, and sometimes it takes me a while.
Yeah. Do you if it actually takes a while, do you, I don't know if prefer is the right word, but do you prefer that process, or do you prefer it to be easier?
I prefer everything to be easier because life is difficult. But it's always frustrating. But sometimes it just sort of comes to me, and sometimes I like really want to do something about a certain subject and have to force myself to find a take. I don't like it taking a while, but I suppose the difficult thing is I kind of like have to work it out before I start like literally typing the words, because you got to know where you're going when you start, even if you pretend to go somewhere else. I did the video on like Journal of the Plague Year, and I thought that was so interesting and so weird that it was kind of such an odd book that it's sort of technically fiction, but also not. And he was a journalist, but also originated the novel, and I couldn't work it out in my head for ages. I would have done it much earlier if I had. But then I sort of forced myself to I found a good podcast who talked about the book, and people who are smarter than me. I actually credited them in the video and they retweeted it, and that was really nice.
Oh, that's awesome.
The backlisted podcast. But I just sort of forced myself to find a take on it. But that's why I wrote it, because I didn't have one and wanted to work it out.
Right.
But once I had, I wrote it in a day. So it's really about the time you invest in sort of thinking. For me, I mean, 95% of writing anything is the time you put into thinking about it. And the actual letters on the page and the time you spend typing them is a very, very small part of the whole thing.
Oh, that's interesting. I think I would kind of agree with that. Sometimes I'm just walking around in circles trying to think of something.
Yeah, I feel that too. I haven't abandoned anything yet because it took too long. I was kind of on the verge with the last one, but I found something really excited to do next. But yeah, I've got a very, very long list of interesting video ideas, and occasionally I look at them and go, well, that one doesn't have a visual hook to me, so I'll leave it a bit on the hope that I'll come up with an idea. And other times I got a good visual, but I was like, I don't know what that's really about. And I suppose the key is just put it in a drawer and let it fester until it's ready to bring it out, I suppose.
How long
see what it grows into. I haven't actually read it because it's on my, because I use my phone, and obviously it's infinite scrolling, so I don't.
Oh, yeah.
I'm just gonna look it up now. And sometimes it's just I recently I've been going, well, does it have to be a full video, or can it be like one of the workshop videos I do, which is just a couple of minutes long? And sometimes I'm not sure, but I've made myself a bit looser. Oh, I've 5 pages long of bullet points.
Oh my god!
Yeah, and some stuff I mention in a line is something else. I was doing King Arthur, I was like, I could do a whole video on Kazuo Ishiguro, the author of The Buried Giant, and I sort of went, well, I've mentioned him now. If I do, it'll be a while, so I can put that on the backlist.
That's interesting.
And sometimes it's just funny stuff, and that's a joke in my head that I can't wait to do. I don't have anything for it yet, but give it time and I can throw it in. So sometimes it's just 4 bullet points will go into one video, and I'm like, okay, well, that's made it better, and I can put them to rest now and ignore them for a while. But it's basically looking for a mix of good theme, good visual, a populist clickbait title, and something more universal about storytelling in general. And once I have a vague pitch for each of those, then I feel good about the video. And generally, I tend to then start writing the visuals and not just adding them on later, which is best, I feel.
Wait, writing the visuals? You actually describe what it's going to look like?
Yeah, it's in my list of like lessons we've learned, and I sort of realized that a lot of YouTubers, I think there is a weird way it works, and sometimes it's on like very small, maybe a bit rubbish channels, but also in like the big popular stuff, is that they'll have written a script where they sort of talk about what they're talking about. And it seems to be they do that, then they record it, and they put it in the edit suite, and they'll go, okay, play me off, Johnny. And then it's like trying to find a visual accompaniment to it. So it's sort of like the inverse of a silent film, where, silent films, huge amount of effort and time gone into making the visuals, and then what do we do for sound? Oh, I don't know, play the piano. And I think with YouTube it's the opposite. It's like people make like radio, and then visually they're like, play me off, and they'll find some clips that match, and sometimes not always. And they feel kind of separate. And I've done it occasionally. And I'm not proudest of myself when I do, but I've found over time, like, if you think about it as a visual while you're writing it, you can write around visuals you'll put in. So if you want to make 2 points, you can go, oh, I can make one of those points visually if I have this on screen and it does that, whilst I'm also saying this other thing which adds to that. So you can sort of do 2 things at once, which is always the dream, and just avoid it feeling like radio with visuals.
It's a crazy idea. I haven't actually. I used to write the visual accompaniment, like when I started doing videos. I had like a partner, and he would do the editing and I would do the script basically in the audio. And eventually we made this process where we discussed, and on like the script was on one side and what was going to be the visual was on the right side, so that we both knew what it was before we started. And like he would tweak.
So you write the audio visual at the same time, and that can be a bit tricky. But for me, mostly it's like there are like 4 beats in 3 pages where I know that's going to happen, but then they give me ideas for how to join them up visually as well.
Right. Yeah. You have, like on my videos, there's like sometimes there'll be two visuals that connect to each other in like a really cool way. Sometimes I plan it. Sometimes I notice like you really make an effort, and sometimes you like 4 together.
Yep.
Like, it's amazing.
I like when I do I do pour it in, because then I'm like, oh god, it's just like I can't smash cut something else. But it's like with King Arthur, when I was making that, I had like loads of stuff I cut out of that. I had like an interview with Zack Snyder where he makes it like very clear King Arthur is a reference point in a lot of stuff he does. There's like a clip from both cuts of the Justice League, actually, where they talk about big round table in the middle, and we'll put some chairs around. I go, Arthurian reference, all that stuff. And, all the stuff that was backing up the point I made. But I'd gotten in the edit and realized that, I can, like, there's a sequence in that King Arthur video where I can connect the beginning of each shot to the previous one, and then the end of that shot to a different one, and, like, leapfrog it in the edit really well. If I cut anything else in there, that would ruin it, so I took it out. So, like, cutting out stuff is a big part of making it better. But that wasn't, like, intended from day one. I, like, knew what clips I wanted in there. And then once it was in the edit, I was like, visually that could connect to this thing. And then I'd find it and put it in. So it was kind of improvisational, but also I knew I write those for each act as well. Because I think, like, something I'm still annoys me about the last video I did is that there's not as good a segue between each chapter in the video. And that can feel a bit abrupt, I think. And, well, you can write the whole thing and then sit down and go, these 2 things are really unconnected. Like, how do I do that? And then you sort of think about ongoing themes of the video, and if you've got, like, an ongoing visual metaphor, then that can be a good justification to change it. And also just knowing your cuts, like the difference between a smash cut or a match cut or, a dialogue cue or all that stuff, is that you can then choose from those as, oh, that sort of cut. If I look for something that matches or something that clashes, or a point to hang on and a black screen or whatever, that's all like good for inspiration. But I do try and make myself do it at every possible moment, and I don't do it in the whole thing. But so I'm sort of successful half the time. But it's all about making yourself thinking about it, I suppose.
This is a great, like all your videos. I feel like this is a great masterclass.
Some people feel that way. But like I said, I feel in two minds. I think half of me is very stupid, and half of me tries to be smarter, and they meet in the middle sometimes. That's how it feels. I think like that's very much like what my disability gives me as well, because I have moments where I'm very on point and moments when I'm not. And when you're not sharp, you realize how alert you were when you were alert, and then sort of go, oh God, I'm not able to do that now. But it also makes you appreciate using your time appropriately. So when you realize that you're in a good mood or good moment, you're like, okay, now's the time to think properly about it. And also knowing that if something doesn't feel right, believe that little voice in your head. And if you just think about it for a prolonged period of time, in the aggregate, your brain will make it up and hopefully compensate. But this sounds like I sort of sat down with a typewriter and wrote, 10 rules for YouTubing on a thing and like chiseled it in stone and put it on top of a mountain. No, it's just like you do the reading and learn all the stuff. And then you just sort of try and ignore it and realize some of it sticks around. So once you're thinking about things in the right mode, it sort of slips out off the cuff sometimes and you don't anticipate it. I suppose it's just like training your brain to know when something isn't working and to chase the right sort of impulse, whether it's curiosity or perfectionism, which you shouldn't always listen to, but also know when you should listen to it.
Yeah, that's a tricky one. It's like I never really know what the limit is with that one. I just usually give it sort of like a time limit, or if I get tired of chasing it, I'm just like, okay, that's it.
Yeah, I mean, what I try and do is that if I'm inspired, which I'll be honest is not often, I'll write what I can when I'm in the right mode, knowing, well, if I don't finish this, or even if I don't get inspired again, to go back through what I've read, I'll go, oh, I remember what I was interested in. Okay, I can continue this going. It's far harder. It's the hardest part is starting. But once you have, it's a memory of what you wanted to do, and it reminds you to do it. But it's like I've got a bunch of stuff that's like half done, some stuff that's just like bullet points. But write it when it comes to you, and that time you spend not doing it still goes into it in a weird way. Your brain still processes it.
It's so interesting that it feels like our actual process is somewhat similar, but and yet so very different. Like I don't actually have. I used to have a lot of things on the go, but I've changed sort of my focus so many times that now it's one or nothing.
Yeah, but I think your stuff proves that out, because I think like your stuff has increasingly felt more and more and more focused as time has gone on. I'm kind of jealous.
Maybe it's part of what you were talking about, where gradually stuff that you're thinking about just permeates itself into the work. Yeah,
it's an ongoing sort of interior conversation, but that's life. I think everyone goes through that. Everyone spends time thinking about things. It's just like how you express it is the real question, and also like skill of execution as well. I was thinking about. I can't remember who I was talking to about it actually, but like my most sort of recent background was like as a script editor, and it was a weird thing because I had a working relationship. Well, I still have a working relationship with a producer, And she's got plenty of stuff that she develops or looks at or produces, or this needs a redraft or something. So she'll come to me with like a project that she's gotten into her hands and ask for notes on it. And when you start doing that job, you realize, well, like stories are the result of two things, like the artist's inspiration and the skill they execute it with. Not just as like a piece of media in terms of cinematography or editing or stuff like that, but like in the skill of the writing. And I knew that, well, the creative side of things, what the artist has to say, it's not my jurisdiction. It's not even my right to talk about what they should or shouldn't do. So I can only critique them on skill. So I have to learn to divine what they meant to say and how well they're saying it from each other, which gives you like a very, very specific view in watching anything, really. It's kind of like the Eye of Odin. You can't ever pluck it back out again. But you sort of very quickly start to understand what an artist is trying to say and how successful they are. And it's always a question to me whenever I talk about anyone else who does anything creative. It's like, these ideas and this is really great stuff. And the real effort goes into putting it across right. That's always the hard thing, and I still struggle with it all the time.
It's a really interesting way to phrase it. I remember, I think Roger Ebert described film criticism as how well did they achieve what they were trying to do, and it sounds like script editing basically gives you a tool set to do that.
Yeah, I mean, when it's your job and you do it over and over again, that's the mindset you adopt. It just becomes harder when like the movie or the script is worse, because when it's good, they know how to tell you what they want to say. When it's bad, you're trying to work out what it is they're going on about. But like, and oftentimes I was like, I realized what element of their story they weren't thinking about as much. Whether it's a subplot or a certain theme, or they haven't thought it through or whatever. But it's certainly something I've started to apply to my own stuff, is just trying to think about what I'm trying to say, and then get to a point where I'm very, very confident in what I'm trying to say, and then go, okay, well, now the job is trying to execute it right.
Right. Yeah, I noticed with your stuff that
I was just going to ask if you had like an ongoing list of ideas and stuff you wanted to do, even if you haven't sat down and done them yet. Do you have like in your head a rolling list of stuff that you might do at some point?
Yeah, actually, it's open right now just because I was looking at something earlier. And I share it with my patrons as well, just because I thought, I don't know what to share with these people. I might as well show them what I'm working on. And I'm sure none of them are looking at it, but they all can.
That was my fear. It's especially my fear when you do a Q&A at length after a year, and it's just like you got 100 subscribers, no one gives a shit. I don't know. I'm just guessing.
I think at some point we have to ask ourselves what exactly it is we want to do, and do it whether or not we're worried about people watching it.
Yeah, I've spent a long time trying to unpick that very self-conscious thing of, oh God, I made a thing and people are going to watch it and critique it, and it's terrifying. But I've known a lot of creative people who don't finish things. I think that's like a writer's problem, especially because a book is a long thing. A screenplay is a long thing. It's the old Neil Gaiman quote, is that, if you're a poet, you can make a career out of working when you're inspired. But when you're a writer, you've got a page count. And you do have to put stuff out even when it doesn't feel finished, and you can just hope that you get close to it. And that's the most worrying thing. Because I think with my background, it's like, because on YouTube, you're doing everything. So when I like, no wonder people make simple stuff, because it's easier to do simple stuff. But if you're doing everything and you're like, okay, well, I'm not that good at editing, or I'm not that good at visual stuff, then that's going to show in the final product, and it's all on you.
Yeah, it's funny. The more as I go, the more I realize like how much I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, that is the endless. And everyone thinks they could do it, and I did too. It's funny. I mean, I've got my flashcards of like videos I've done, and the first one is like Contagion. I watched it again, and it's very weird. Like looking at it, going, oh, some of those visuals are like really janky. And I recorded that wrong, and I did a thing. And I'm awful with audio anyway. It's the one thing I have no experience in. But then realizing I did other stuff fine, but going, okay, well, the reason why I know that now is because I did it and put it out and kept doing it. And now my eye is better trained, or my ear is more attuned, and I can see the problems more obviously, which, cringe, but you earn it by finishing things. And like, as with anything, the more you do a thing, whether you hate it or you love it, or you're born to it or you're really not, if you just keep doing it, you will get better at it.
It's kind of like a jumping point, I guess. But since you started talking about your first video, I was very interesting the note you ended on there.
I still look back at it and go, oh, I love that ending. And by the way, that wasn't scripted at all. It was supposed to end on whatever point it was. Even like the whole, I do the scene from Contagion using the audio from Jaws, where they're all rushing the pharmacists or whatever, the smash button thing. I didn't even plan on that, and I thought that was quite fun. But I couldn't. I'd listened to a lot of Soderbergh, because he's a really interesting filmmaker, and that clip that you end on in that I end on in the Contagion video was for the making of Shay, which was like a two film war movies about Che Guevara in Spanish. And he'd spent years putting it together, and I thought, like, ever since then, there's something about his movies where he's gone, I guess I can't change the world with them. And I just thought that was such an interesting thing for him to very openly say, that filmmaking isn't as culturally important as it was in the 70s, the era that he grew up in wanting to be part of. And that fitting so well with Contagion being like this very genuine attempt to like spread almost like positive propaganda of like warning people about the danger of that and all the elements in it and what to do and who will grift you and all that stuff. And it wasn't, a hit, and it wasn't Jaws. It didn't make that much money. And I could sort of sensed a weird melancholia after that point in the stuff. And I thought, I can't end on anything else, because if I did, then you'd sort of be pretending that it was a mega hit and that we're all fine. And the pandemic didn't go down well. Isn't going down well for anyone, because, lessons weren't learned. Yeah. And that wasn't scripted at all. I knew the interview, and I just had that bad feeling in my stomach that I would be dishonest if I didn't mention that as part of his ongoing career or his attitude towards filmmaking and storytelling. And I just thought, it's always more because I think a lot of YouTubers, like, it's almost like you're pressured to say thing bad or thing good, and the reality is never that. And I think it's just always more interesting to say thing complex. And I think that that was at the point, especially the fact I didn't plan on it, but it taught me that, if it is complex, keep it in. Like make that the point of the video, is that it's never as simple as you think it is, and be honest about the repercussions.
I would really be interested to hear what he thinks now, having people go back and watch his movie more now that the pandemic started. Like, what is his reflection on film and culture after that fact?
I don't even know how I feel about it. I suppose we won't for a while. I know me and the family watched it when the pandemic first hit, because, Dad's missus had never seen it before. And I said to him, once lockdown is fully ended, we've got to watch it again, because I think it's going to be a very different experience. But
Yeah.
yeah, Soderbergh's always sort of put interesting sort of political stuff into whatever he's made, or like I don't know, he never confirms, but I always suspect his politics sort of drives the movies he makes, and I was like, okay, is that true anymore? And I don't know, I'd love to hear what he has to say. Part of me imagines that he's like the guy with the board saying that the world is coming to a fucking end, and no one listened to him, and now it's like I told you.
I I don't. I almost don't want to admit this since we're recording, but when I heard that Bill Gates and his wife had split up, I just wondered if after the pandemic started, he just went into this uninhibited rage. He's like, I told them, and nobody listened. And she's like, I can't listen to this anymore.
Yeah, he would become insufferable, wouldn't he?
I know it's far more complex than that, but it was the first thought I had.
Yeah, I couldn't take him saying "I told you so" over and over again in his sleep. Oh, I suppose like next flashcard. I suppose that's a good way to pivot onto like the next video I did, which is kind of like the least successful one I've ever done, which is about Fahrenheit 451. Probably because it's, you know, a book and not any especially successful movie. But I think I look back on that now and I went, oh god, okay. So I sort of went into this whole thing thinking explainer series, but for writing, because obviously, like, as a script editor, that's kind of the job anyway, is telling people what to look at and what, you know, not to get wrong and what to go into it with and all that stuff. And it felt like you're trying to change the world one person at a time. So then I thought, okay, well, if I do a series about that, that's the premise of the YouTube channel, that might be a good thing. And obviously I thought, okay, well, premise, that's a good place to start on a writing channel, I think. And actually the first like draft I did of it was like 2 years before I even started the channel. It was in a shelf on a shelf somewhere. But it was weird because that was like, I was on certain medication at the time that sort of removes self-reflection, really. You can't sort of really observe yourself in the third person at all. And I was on that sort of medication for years and years and years. And I would, safe to say at that point, the idea of running a YouTube channel was a delusion. But I had written the first episode anyway. And after being told by my pain clinic to quit those medications, a very weird thing happened where all this sort of weird fuzziness, this weird sort of tunnel vision, you know, it gives you, was sort of removed. And my brain sort of took about 18 months to reformat, basically. I sort of woke up one day and then I realized, oh, Star Wars is a kids movie, you know, and all this stuff I was watching and reading just like changed because after my brain processed for about 18 months, after quitting all this medication, like overnight it changed. It's like, and we're back on. And then suddenly I had this sort of self-awareness and I sort of went, oh god, maybe the YouTube channel thing isn't a bad idea. And then I went over my original draft of that with a new brain that allowed me to think properly. So it's kind of a weird mash, but I think like it's weird because looking at it, I was like, actually, that's probably why like the visual and the visual themes and the themes, like kind of work really well in that video, because the idea of like a premise being like a spark that starts a fire, and that Fahrenheit 451 has a great premise, and also it's an example, and obviously there's a lot of fire imagery in that and all that stuff. So like the ongoing like running theme of that video is really on point. But looking at it now, I sort of realized, and maybe I should have known this, but people who want to write all think they can do it, and no one goes for an explainer channel because they don't think it needs explaining, which is a friction I've gotten a lot when I gave notes on other people's scripts and stuff. And I suddenly realized there's no hungry audience for people who just wanted to learn how to write it because everyone thought they could do it. So looking over it, I think as an explainer video, like the lessons are always good. Like even in the workshop stuff I do, which are videos that are 2 or 3 minutes long, like Some of them are more entertaining, some of them are less so, but the lessons are always worthwhile. That's what I think about Fahrenheit. But ultimately, that's the one that made me think, if I'm going to do another like deep dive into a certain aspect of writing, premise in that case, then I'm going to have to disguise it. And it took me a long time to figure out how to do that, but the end result was Khuleshov characters. Because I wanted to make another video explaining what character is, and going, oh god, I can't just straight explain it, but can I look at something else? And then I realised the faceless thing. So basically, like Khuleshov characters are like episode 2 of that running series, having rebranded after the first one that didn't go down well. Also, interesting trivia about the Fahrenheit video is it is banned in Iran, Syria, Cuba, and North Korea, and not, I think, for copyright violation.
I wonder. Oh, is it because of the nature of the book?
Yes, about the suppressing information. Some irony there.
Yeah.
I think North Korea have basically flagged anything relating to Fahrenheit 451. Basically,
Title alone, yeah, that makes sense. Wow.
I feel weirdly proud.
You should be.
All 40 views of it.
Do you I think about this a lot in terms of viewers. You said people who want to write think they can do it. Do you think there's a subset of people who aren't necessarily writing but are interested in the process of writing or how things are structured?
I think people who do it without thinking about it and do it well are usually doing it in something else. So, like, it might be like a gaming YouTuber or a Twitch streamer or something, and then they start sort of adding in more elements to tell more of a story, or they have a character that they pretend to be, and then give them an ongoing arc, or like in like the lore of like Filthy Frank videos or whatever. There's actually an awful lot of storytelling going on there, a lot of innovation, and a lot of getting it right, basically by trial and error. It's that when people sort of sit down to be a writer and think it's like whiskey next to the typewriter, and it's like the opening 10 minutes of misery or whatever, that's when it sort of becomes a problem, because they sort of buy into like the fantasy of that. So actually, people who are invested in being a writer tend to have more of a stumbling block, because obviously everyone's feeling is that I have so much to share, so much to offer. It's just a matter of getting it out there. And if you set yourself up to be a writer, you sort of feel like you've already got it all figured. But if you're in something else, like you're doing online webcomics or something, and you're actively pursuing it, you probably get more practice in. You're probably not thinking of yourself in certain ways, and you certainly don't feel like you're not getting your take out there. So it's a very weird thing like that the people who sort of need to break that mentality aren't the people who seek it out if you make a channel for it.
Right.
Which is why I've done more stuff about storytelling in a more general way, like King Arthur or stuff like that, because it's not lecturing anyone.
Yeah, it's like what's the word? Unintentional teaching.
Yeah, I mean, well, come back to the same thing, don't we? Like, the more you do something, the better you get at it. And if you're telling stories as part of something else you're focused on, actually you tend to train yourself quite well. Although there are certain like academic things that you do need to do, but if the day should come where you want to write a screenplay, it is important to read all the books, but then sort of let them go at a certain point. So after realizing that no one wants to be lectured to, that's kind of very early on, my channel sort of took a little bit of a different direction, or trying to hold on to certain things. That's why the workshops loosened up a little bit, because those used to be like writing exercise. You know, I've got a whole drawer full of like writing exercises to do when you have a certain problem, because I need to give these things out to writers whose scripts I was giving notes on, going, God, your character isn't good, not here, but if I give you this exercise, you can go away and do it, and train yourself to be, and come back with what you've learned and give me another draft after that. So I had a whole drawer full of them and wanting to share them all. But I don't know how many people sort of look up writing exercises other than other people who run YouTube channels telling you how to write. So yeah, I sort of loosened it up on that, and I think people are always interested in videos that just analyze how certain things work. Like Kurzgesagt is a great channel that like everyone loves. Not everyone wants to be a scientist, but they do want to understand how certain things work. And I think like just changing the tone of address towards this is how this thing in these movies or these books work, then actually a lot more people become interested in it. So that's been the mild change over the course of time for me.
Yeah. I was going to ask you this question at some point. Now seems good as time as any. Are you, would you consider yourself like a teacher, or have you habitually found yourself teaching in the past, whether directly or indirectly?
If it is, it's all indirect, but well, yeah, well, you laugh, but it's just like stuff like even in college, I was sort of doing it because no one else had read the books. You know, John Truby or Sid Field or whatever. They're teaching how to screenwrite, but I was like in this position where, you know, I'd been like bedbound since I was 13 years old. And before I got to college, I was in bed for 5 years, and all I could do was read about this stuff. So I'd like had the time to do all the proper reading and going, oh, you're just starting. Well, I've been reading up for 5 years, and I guess this is what I learned. Try that out. And then it actually became like a weird habit in college of like people, because, you know, actors would write stuff and then we'd just act it right then and there, which is kind of like gold for any writer, is to have people performing your stuff. But like there came a time for everyone who tried writing to ask me, and then and I would, you know, and it's not as easy as it sounds. Like even if you give, like if you're given something that's 10, 12 pages long, you're reading it and rereading it and rereading it in order to understand what they're trying to do. And so it takes like 3-4 hours to do each one. But I did it because it was all in good fun. But that's kind of what I pivoted off onto doing script editing properly. And you sort of can't get around the fact you're telling someone how to do their job. Which is why leaving the artistic inspiration out of it, because then you're more professional and you're not critiquing their soul, you're just critiquing like their skill, and that's how you build it. So it's weirdly kind of teacherly but not really, and often, like at least historically, it's always been through a document I've written and sent to them. So it's not so much in person as it is just the advice given. So kind of, but not really, is the answer to that question.
Those are really
sorry to be think complex.
Think complex.
Yeah. The next one on my flashcards was Daniel DeFoe and A Journal of the Plague Year, which
this one's great.
It might still be my best, and I almost can't explain to you how it happened, but yeah, I spent a long time thinking about it and then formulated my take on it and wrote it in a day, mainly because out of the fucking blue, I had the pitch in my head for the visuals, and that's like, oh, we track across a street, and I can create parallax with the houses and the river and the background. I can use real like woodcut drawings from the period, give them all the same texture, and that's the video. So I had like a really strong visual premise for that, and that was like exciting enough for me to start going on it, and like wrote it and recorded it, edited the sound to the second so it was absolutely right, and then just export that into like an animation program, and it's all gravy from then on. And you do like skits and stuff, and some of them were were stumbling blocks for me, like, oh god, like the bit where the cart crashes. I'm visually talking about this thing. Oh god, what do I do to like visually demonstrate that? And So because of the way the animation studio works, is you can do it in any order. You can even animate little skits in isolation and drop them on top and stick them to the road. So I filled in non-chronologically, bit by bit. Sometimes I had to draw people. So, Ben Wheatley drops in to talk about his historical research for a field in England. That's the same interview shows up in the Amy Jump video, by the way. And I thought, well, none of these ye olde woodcutty people look like Ben Wheatley. I'll just do it. So my granddad left me his writing desk when he died, and that includes all the fountain pens and the dipping ink and stuff. And I would just mess about with it and draw stuff. And since then, I've drawn stuff with it occasionally. So I have, like, in my drawer the real practical drawings of, like, Ben Wheatley's head, and then a dissected Billie Eilish, because you have to animate all the limbs separately. So occasionally I'll add stuff in, and everything else is period woodcuts, except for the houses, because I couldn't find enough. And though there's a series in Britain called Upstart Crow, which was about Shakespeare, and it's like a sitcom, but all the intros are animated like the DeFoe video, basically. And I found the guy's original artwork for that, and it was just a bunch of houses. And I thought, oh, this is brilliant. They're all from the same perspective. So I stole them. He is credited in the end credits, but that's like the only stuff that isn't like period or mine, basically. That and the music. So it all sort of happened in this wild, mad flurry, which did contribute to like a crash in my health soon after. And I've always looked back on that and gone, I wish I had the energy to do that every month.
Yeah.
I don't quite, but it was one of those sort of cases where a really interesting visual premise came with the subject matter. And it was a neat 3 acts and all that stuff. And I just sort of rode the inspiration through to the end, basically. So I almost can't work out how it works. Although I am... Oh, sorry, no, you go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that's crazy. Go on.
Oh, yeah. I'm thinking about how to recreate that, and I go, I do have an idea for a sort of sequel. There's a modernist novel called Under the Volcano, which is sort of written in the 50s, and it's a really unique book. It's it's the second book the writer ever wrote, and he drank himself to death shortly after, and it's about alcoholism and all this stuff. And I thought, because it's set in Mexico on the Day of the Dead, and the cover especially has all these little sort of skeleton painted people on it, and I thought, I could do a whole video like that, like Daniel DeFoe, with all these sort of the Day of the Dead Mexican sort of makeup jobs, except it would be like a rolling horizon. So instead of tracking left to right across a street, the horizon would come up towards you, and you'd see what's going on the horizon before the next one comes up. So you'd feel like you're tracking forwards across land, basically. So I've had that premise for a while. I just haven't committed my time to it because I'm like, I don't know how many people would click on a video that's about Under the Volcano. But believe you me, I've got a kind of like a semi-sequel in mind for that.
I don't know about other people, but and this is probably wrong of me to do, but I really would want to see it. Like, that was this was the first video of yours I actually ever found, and
same for a lot of people.
And I remember looking at it thinking, like, how did he do this? How did he do? And I think this is the first conversation we ever had. I was like, how did you do this?
I feel the same way when I watch it. I'm not entirely sure, but it's it's just I suppose it's the animation program, understanding how that works and going, well, I've never done anything that size before, but I know how to do one skit that lasts 30 seconds. And if you're tracking left to right across the street, you can do a load of skits to make up the runtime, basically. And then add in other stuff that overlaps and everything like that. I think like it works because it's like end to end. It's such a good visual idea. It doesn't cut, it's one take, as it were.
Yeah.
And it's almost an excuse to have like a sketch show of all these period jokes and stuff, and match what's being shown to what's being said. And I suppose a lot of the time went into just making sure that it all looked visually of a piece. So there are like woodcuts and drawings from different decades and eras, but I realized that if I just took the black lines, up the contrast so they're all equally as black, and basically the texture was like this old vintage style paper I bought from like a paper depository place where you go and browse different types of paper to draw on, scan that in, made that the background to all the black lines, assembled all the pieces. Basically I put together all the characters and maybe separated their limbs a bit so I can animate the limbs separately. I just gave myself a big cast of characters, not necessarily knowing what I'd do with them. And I just like play the audio and go, what would be a good funny thing here? And then I would like go, oh, I could do like the butterfly meme, but I need a butterfly. So I just go in, do that, come back, put it in. And then I was like, okay, now I've got that. So it was like, oh God, it must have been 2 solid weeks of animation every day. And it did burn me out for a long, long time. But I still look at it and go, oh, could I do something that good today? I don't know. And I think it works because the premise, the idea was good enough. Right, so next video on my flashcard is my disability video.
Oh man, this is the doozy.
Yeah, well, it's a big one. Well, like, tell me, it's like the one that's closest to me. So I don't know. I'd love to know how you think of it.
I think that it is required viewing.
Oh,
basically.
that higher compliment.
Yes, all the way at the top. I think everyone should see it.
That's very nice to hear.
It's very well constructed. Here, I have a little note here. It's personal, it's powerful, it's well reasoned, and it tries to create a space that says, "Hey, the world can be better, and here's how."
Oh my God!
Like if there's not much more you can ask of a video essay.
That's really sweet. Thank you very much for that. It's your Canadian earnestness coming through. I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
Because with his voice, I either sound patronizing or sarcastic, and I can't get over that, but thank you. I think it's kind of odd to work out how I think about it. It's the one video of mine I've never rewatched since uploading it. Because it is, well, it was like obviously a very personal thing. And I don't really want to like go back over that. But also it was like the video I did before I crashed horribly and couldn't upload for months. Because I was trying to get it in on time for Disability Pride Month.
Right.
And so I don't really, like, I suppose when I look at it, all I see are flaws. But I stick by the premise I had, which was basically go in to talk about disability and fiction. Because, by the way, like, unlike a lot of other civil rights causes that have been kept out of media for a very long time, disability isn't really like that. It's in everything. It's like that moment when you realize that, like, The Matrix, Dune, and Star Wars all have heroes who become disabled at a certain point, at which point they learn to see the world in a deeper way and rise to success. You sort of go, well, it hasn't really been kept out. It's just not been written by disabled people. And I sort of wanted to like formulate the weird things about that and the bad tropes, but I suppose like there was something really interesting about doing it, because you can find a lot of people talking about representation in media on YouTube, whether it's race or it's trans rights, whatever. But I couldn't really find one about disability. You can find like disability lifestyle channels, but no one who's really talking about it in media. I don't think it's that popular a subject matter with anyone really, but it meant that there was so much like untrodden snow. There was so much that hadn't been talked about that I kind of took all these things that I could have easily made an essay on individually, like the robot arm fallacy, for example. I could do a whole video on that, but I want to just like put a bit of everything in there and stitch it together. And it was like really great to write about a subject matter on which I had seen nothing written before, really. Obviously, there are like there's a lot of work been done before, like academically and stuff, but I'd never seen a video essay on YouTube that did what I kind of wanted it to do. So it was a gap in the market. It felt fun to write at length about something that no one else was really talking about. I mean, I don't like. I think looking at it, I was like, I don't fool myself into thinking it'll change the world, because there's so much more to be done about disability issues than critiquing representations in media. But it's something I could contribute to, which is like, I think about that quite often about like anything I do. It's like, well, what do I have to offer this? Am I just not some fucking guy from just someone talking about a thing? And I think I keep asking like, okay, well, what's my perspective on this that wouldn't be offered by anyone else? I suppose that's like the OG video. I am ultimately very proud of it. I don't know if I could or will watch it again. But the idea of like making something populist for a populist audience who wouldn't otherwise think about it. So in a way, it's like got more sort of like mainstream panache than most of what I do. In order to get that audience in, basically, and give them a bit of a lesson. But by the end, like that end chapter isn't really like, there's nothing about media in it. It's just talking about the current sort of state of things, generally speaking. And like the writing process was like 3 weeks. It's a long time trying to get it all right. Daniel DeFoe done in a day, that one done in like 3 weeks, because I wanted to get it right. And a lot of that was not saying things, like basically watering like a whole subject matter down to a sentence, but make it a great sentence. And maybe if I want to talk about it again, I will at a later date and expand upon it. But yeah, I got it in on time.
Just know that you succeeded, my friend.
That means an awful lot to say, because it's well, you see the flaws and everything afterwards, don't you? And not revisiting it and reminding myself what I did right was contributes to that. But it means an awful lot to hear you say that. Thank you very much. And of course, it left us with the pride flag in my logo, which I thought was so nice it has stayed.
Yeah,
the zigzags.
good.
Yeah, I thought I'd keep that in for a while. So
The other thing too is I don't know how many I gather from conversations that you watch a lot of other YouTube essayists and stuff, but like,
yeah,
everything I saw about it was exactly what I thought other top creators would make, like H-Bomber Guy and all that stuff. And it's the exact kind of thing that people seem to want to consume. When I saw it, I was like, I wish I could do this. And so I think just keep your eye on that one. Like, I wonder if it's just waiting for its time, you know?
I feel optimistic about its lifespan. Yeah, and like undeniably, like H-Bomber Guy and Lindsay Ellis and all them folk, obviously a big inspiration on it. About a subject that I don't think even they talk about, but I think like it's probably because my health crashed so badly after that, because I had to get it in on that month, that I sort of associate that with like pain, like because I spiraled out and I was doing too much and produced too much too quickly. That it's made me sort of hesitant to go back. But I also see like there is an absolute gap in the market for someone who talks about disability on an ongoing basis in media. And I suppose that should be me, but also I don't know if I have it in me to like talk about a very personal subject matter at length.
Yeah.
And also I think like disabled people generally feel an awful lot of risk when exposing themselves to any degree, which is well founded. So I have a lot of anxiety about like going back into that again. And you know, it's like 2.5 months from now is the next window to do it again, and I don't know if I want to. I've got like premises and ideas and some stuff written for disability stuff, but I'm just like, I want to keep it going.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's always something you have the ability to revisit should you decide, you know. But if people were looking for just one-off for discussion of disability in media, then this is more than enough. Shows them, you know, a conversation that needs to be had. And I think at some point someone will find it, and it'll be like a jumping point for a greater discussion, or become part of a larger discussion, hopefully.
Well, that's my hopes for it. I think I was a little pessimistic at the time because I think a lot of the support I got on the video was from the populist crowd who wouldn't otherwise think about the subject matter, and not like more political sides of YouTube that would be into like an H-Bomber Guy video, for example. And I think I took that a bit personally. I mean, it's a silly thing to say, isn't it? Because as Yahtzee once put it, we're all throwing messages in a bottle into a massive ocean of bottles with messages in them. That like no one is like the chances of one being picked up is like minuscule. But I suppose like I'm slightly guarded against, you know, a lot of people who talk politics because none of them seem to really think about the subject matter that much, and it didn't get that much support from them at the time. So maybe that's part of it too. I think like I'm just anxious to go back in there for a variety of small reasons, which probably shouldn't be grounds to worry.
I guess it's hard to know, right? I think people are drawn to certain things at certain times, and I think there may come a time when you may be drawn to it again. Like I think it'll be part of whatever this YouTube journey is for all of us, and yourself included. Like it will be something that comes up again in some capacity. Yeah. And
yeah, I think it's like I think part of the mood of the video is that no one's really interested in having this conversation yet. So it's almost like an "I told you so" to the future. It's like the moment people start talking about it, I can say I was there first. Who knows?
If you're looking for someone to say "I told you so," I'll listen to it as many times as you say.
I really appreciate that. Thank you. Oh, next on the list.
I told you so.
It's Tuesday.
It's Wednesday. I told you so.
Okay, next on the list was King Arthur.
Saw you change the thumbnail on this one.
I did, because after it came out, I was like, oh yeah, all the King Arthur movies are rubbish. I don't think people were really buying it, and the thing that got me into writing that video in the first place was the Green Knight and my anticipation for the trailer, and that going on to me reading a couple of books and going, well, with the film almost coming out, people are going to want video essays on it. So if I change it now, and it has already helped the search algorithm.
That's awesome.
So pragmatism rears its fucking head again. But yeah, I don't think that's too much of a cheat. And I don't think it's cheating if people are forced into watching something they actually end up really liking.
No, I don't think so at all. Thumbnails are a free space.
Yes, thumbnails changeable. It's fine. I actually have a friend who's an artist, and yeah, I think she actually just kind of designed the Khuleshov thumbnail for me. Because I go overboard quite often, as anyone who watches my stuff can tell. I am a maximalist, not a minimalist, and she whipped me into shape and said this needs to be legible. So I've taken that philosophy and turned it backwards and readdressed some stuff in previous videos. I changed the thumbnail for Contagion as well, because I thought it was funnier seeing Gwyneth Paltrow eaten by a shark rather than the previous one I had. But yeah, I think it might be in competition for my best video.
Yeah, it's I guess, it's funny when you look at someone's whole work. A lot of videos are just different, right? So it's hard to pick like, oh, this is someone's best video, because like as we were talking about earlier, each one kind of serves its own purpose, and they're almost different entities, and it's like no one is necessarily better in some senses than the other. Like I'm sure when we look at our own stuff, we're like, oh well, I know this one's better because, oh man, I learned so much. But
yeah,
at least to an outside viewer, be like, this is great.
Well, it's like it's an active effort, isn't it? Like I try and make each one play by its own rules and give it a unique personality and not try and do the same thing twice. I suppose I come back to it because it's just got a mix of all the stuff I like. Like I'm really proud of the edit, but I'm also really proud of the animation. I like the theme, and I like the clickbaity aspect of it too. So I suppose it might be my favorite because it just does all of the things.
Yeah, you can kind of see it's sort of a part of your evolution in a sense. Your next video about the Mandalorian was somewhat similar.
I'd never thought about that.
Just in terms of like construction.
Yeah. Yes, that's a good point. Yeah, structurally there is a similarity going on there. Maybe I was so happy with how it went, I just defaulted to that the next time. But I think when I think about the King Arthur video, I think it's also a lot of what I want the channel to be as well, in a more general sense, because although I talk about very populist stuff in there, like Arthurian references in Star Wars or Marvel films, I'm also mentioning Pulitzer Prize winning novelists and books from the 50s and short stories and sapiens and more general theories about the way human beings sort of work with stories, and just the references were really diverse because King Arthur kind of ends up in everything. And to piece together highbrow stuff and lowbrow stuff, which is what I think the channel does in aggregate, basically at length. So maybe I think of it as this condensation of all the stuff I kind of want the brand to be, generally speaking. And that's why I like it so much.
Yeah. This is the one where I have all these notes about the editing you were doing. I think that's something that I would appreciate more than say your average viewer, just because I'm oh wow, I can't believe you did this. It's so great.
Yeah, the passing the hammer from one of the first movies to one of the last movies.
Yeah, where Luke throws the sword, or his saber, and it turns into the sword, and then it turns into
grabbing it.
Yeah, you're wow, that was amazing.
But also in that run up of all that stuff, there's this ongoing theme of circles as well. There's the round table. There's Flash running around the tower. There's the story wheel from the Green Knight trailer. So that was another visual theme that kept coming up over and over again. So each edit motivates to the next one, but there's also an ongoing theme throughout them, and a lot of that was just discovered in the edit. It wasn't written, but I will attribute my dad the idea of Luke throwing the thing into the ocean and it turning into Excalibur. That was all his idea.
Oh wow! Tell him bravo.
Yeah, that came from nowhere. And he's also all the voices in the animation segment, because all the little creatures and people are like gabbling, and I just sat him down in front of the raw animation and asked him to like mumble along to what was being, what he was seeing on screen at the same time. And that's all in there. So the little like the devil at the end there, like I leaned into him and I said, Terry Thomas, and he goes, yes, I've got it. And he just does like Terry Thomas is like a 40s 50s actor from all these British comedies. I knew he'd get the reference. He sort of talks like this all the time. I just thought it was a good voice for a devil. And that's so when the devil says bye, that's my father, who is credited as Sir not appearing in this film. Which, in a Holy Grail reference. There's a lot of interesting trivia about the video, actually. So, like, I had to change the song on the end track because 3 months after I posted Daniel DeFoe, the person who did the Bardcore cover of all the songs applied copyright to them, which ruined the copyright for the Plague video. So, initially I had that in my on my credits, and I think it was a cover of Hallelujah, the Leonard Cohen song, which is on point. But what I do is that whenever I do a video, I basically render, like, I blind out all my visual layers and just render like a black version of the video with audio, so I can very quickly render it, very quickly upload it, and check the copyright for the audio at least. And it kept like snagging on that version, so I had to find something else. And what I remembered was basically like there are these two artists, musicians from where I grew up called Hugh and Tony Williams, and they're both Welsh, and they're not related because everyone's called Williams in Wales. And I'd like met them when I was a kid, and we apparently, I don't remember, and we had their albums laying around, and I realised that they're so obscure, none of their music's on Content ID. So, and I've been listening to their stuff since I was a kid, and there was one song called Castles, which was kind of on theme. It's not like the best choice I could have made, but it was certainly the one that gets me around copyright. So that was an odd adventure.
That's what you got to do sometimes.
I know, you got to do it. It's also got like, I think I always try and like put in an after credits joke, and King Arthur has the best one. I don't know whether you've seen it because not everyone does.
I've seen all of them, and it is hilarious. I think I actually missed on your earlier videos. I missed some of the after credits, and this is a crime. I think everybody listening should go watch all of these after credit scenes. They're hilarious. But I don't think I'd seen the Fahrenheit 451 yet, and like I watched it just yesterday, like in preparation, and like I laughed so hard. So just right now, that one's my favorite. Just because I wasn't
really, oh god, well I
wasn't
like
expecting it.
It fucking made me laugh. I mean, that's why I put it in there. And also, like the rest of the video it's a lot slower paced in Fahrenheit, and it's a lot more thinking. There are not really many jokes, but like that one at the end, I think it must have been the first time I'd edited something for animation, and I just couldn't get over the fact you could puppeteer. Oh, yeah, so good. But I'm like, cutting together the duel from Revenge of the Sith with the audio from the Holy Grail was just like too good. I'm like, oh my god, he gets his arm cut off and then he's set on fire.
So well.
It was just irresistible. And part of me goes, oh, I think there are a lot of people, like I gave it to like close friends who I know didn't sit through the fucking credits, and they didn't ever know, and I thought I'm not going to mention it. But I think it's like the funniest thing, but also kind of me really likes like rewarding viewers who like sit through the credits.
Yeah, I think it's really smart too, especially because once they find it, it educates them.
I also like, I can't ever forget like Christopher Nolan talking about credits in movies, saying actually it's like, it's not just a bit of necessary business. It's a really important part of watching a movie, because when the credits roll, you got all the information, but you can sort of go a bit blank, and then what you do is you process everything you've just seen. So it's like downtime for the brain. I don't want autoplay to cut in and ruin the whole thing. I think it's an important amount of time to really think about what you've done, and I think that's where theme works. And theme is kind of my first priority, really. So I wanted to keep credits in for that reason. It makes it hard to find music, but I prefer that to just attributing every clip you see as you watch it, because sometimes the eyes just get distracted looking at the list of whatever movie it was. I mean, it makes it a little bit more inscrutable for some people, but I just think like credits are really important, and the after credits bits are the rewards.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I actually hadn't heard that before.
I gotta find the interview with it somewhere. I actually think it's like worth like a 2-minute video of mine in and of itself talking about credits, because they used to all be at the beginning of a movie, and then George Lucas said, no, I want to start Star Wars quick. And of course, he was producing that himself. So it was an excuse for the studio to fine him in order to do that. But he was not wrong. You start a movie off straight away, and then you end with the credits, and it's a good processing time for the brain. Because even now, I watch some old movies, and credits are all at the beginning, and then at the end they just end, and there's a weird thing in your brain that goes okay, okay, the movie's over, and it doesn't quite work. So that's worth talking about it in and of itself. Another bit of interesting trivia for King Arthur actually was that I made friends with Scribbler's Shack because we both posted a plague themed video, which was one of our firsts, on the same day at the same time, and both watched the others, and we sort of kept in touch since then. And
cool.
Yeah, it was really fun. I mean, making weird internet friends like yourself is been like one of the best parts of parts of the journey so far. But she guested for a line in Khuleshov. She is the voice of Aristotle because she's a big history brain. But like my initial plan was for her to do like the whole animated segment for King Arthur, because she comes from sort of a history background, and I thought, oh, it'd be interesting to like cut away. She gives you the history lesson, and then we come back to me, and that'd be really appropriate for animation. But I didn't want to like go up to her and say, do all this work for free for my video. I wanted to at least like write that first, and then say, if you want to do your own thing with your own research and your own sources, because you'd be smarter than me, you can, but if not, here's the script and I've already got it written for you. But by the time it came to that point and I needed to get going, I like couldn't really wait for a couple of days for her to get back to me, and then a couple of days more for her to record it, and if there are errors, have to do it again, because I need the audio before I animate anything. So, and it does break my heart a little bit, because she is like very impressive with her history stuff. So she had to settle for one line in the next video, but it almost came to be that she did a whole quarter of that. Yeah.
That'd be really cool. At least it's an option in the future.
Yeah, I mean, it's only looking back in it that it annoys me more, because that's like the most history orientated video I've done aside from Plague Year, really, and like she's just better at it than I am. But I don't know what else I'd do in future that would suit her as much. I mean, I'm very lucky she was a fan of The Mandalorian. Because I like, part of me was a bit like I had some reservations about like asking you to do a voice for Amy Jump, because I suspected it wasn't going to be my best video, and a part of me felt a bit guilty that the first time I asked you to do me a line was not going to be my proudest moment. So it's an ongoing struggle I have whenever I come to do it, I'm afraid.
Brother, I don't care if you're like, I for a fact know that this will be my worst video, and be like, I'm on board.
Well, it is almost what I basically said to you anyway, but you were very, very kind at helping me out. Yeah. So, That's King Arthur. Boom. Well, Khuleshov is a good one to segue into, I suppose. Well, we've already said, haven't we, that I sort of basically rebranded the whole explainer thing into a video that would talk about something else. I think Khuleshov was odd because it, like, the end result, it was it the first time I sort of watched a video of mine and realized it didn't end up being what I planned on it being. Because I watched it, I was like, oh fuck, I made a David Lynch film. I didn't mean to do that. Because there's something really like weird and creepy about it. Now, I thought it would be funny if you're going to do an explainer, if you're just going to sit there and explain to someone how something works, it would be really funny if that were a character who's like basically like a BBC infomercial from the 1950s. Like, here's everything you need to know about toast. You know, and just do the whole thing like that. But there was something of a connection with the Mandalorian with it, because the Mandalorian to me is like one of the old 50s adventure serials, these black and white westerns that would just run for 15 minutes back to back and would just be an ongoing story thing. And I thought, and I mentioned it at the beginning of the video, and I thought, oh, that'll do. Play it like an ye olde movie. But the end result ended up being creepy, like unnecessarily creepy, perhaps. That's what other people have told me.
I don't know, Bo. I wonder if I kind of have this this thing where like I find people funny, and once I start to understand like a person, or like I believe that I understand them, like I find what they're doing very amusing. So like I honestly thought it was your funniest video, and at the end when you were like, "Oh, mother died,"
which was not in the script. I had written it to end on a meaningful thing, and I watched it. It's like, this doesn't work. So I just got add in a joke, and then I realized mother died. There you go. Smash cut to credits. Brilliant. So I think it's like my funniest as well. But I think Scribbles at Scribbler Shack was a bit surprised. It's a bit creepy. But then again, that's like my art style. So, by the way, like one of the best things about doing that video was I got to like create a character from nothing. So that is hand drawn, the elements of the character. I got it in a drawer right next to me. And then you just animate the limbs and rig it all properly. But my art style's always been a little bit gross, but you know, as speaking to disability, I've always kind of liked the idea of something that looks a bit weird and maybe a bit off-putting, but you find out actually there's just a normal, understandable, empathetic person in there. So I like the idea of making him like in a wheelchair, but that's nothing to do with his like angst or anything. Right. And obviously, like, it doesn't take much to like draw a character and do a voice. The great part was also the hardest part, and that was basically writing in all the elements you need for character that I mentioned in the video, and basically giving him cutaways where he communicates them to you. So, you know, he has his own goals and wants and needs, and he has his traumatic flashback and all that stuff. So then the comedy becomes like character-based, and that was really fun. But I was tearing my hair out for ages, trying to come up with and work it all out, and I couldn't think of any jokes, and I was convinced it would be like a rubbish mess. But I just got it to the point where I think it worked, and I do think it is one of my funniest in retrospect.
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree. I do have to ask though, what is it you have against poor Joseph Gordon-Levitt?
It's just his blank, dead cow eyes. I just it's mainly developed as like an in-joke between my dad, because I just like every time I watch him, it's like believe me, I understand why he's hired, because he remembers his lines, and he does the little walk, and he turns up on time, and I know the value of that when you're directing actors. Oh my god, this one showed up. But there's just something about his performance where it always like defaults to blank, and sometimes he does spike the ball, I think he's very, very good in Looper, and I think he's very, very good in Lincoln. But there's a weird sort of non-expressiveness to his face. Like the scene in Inception where he has to tell her that, oh, this guy's wife died. And it's just like, it's just blank. And it became so funny, and it needed to be like a was it a 2 or a 3-part setup in the video where I keep like coming back to it. So it's not that I'm 3 times more annoyed with him, it's just that he made for a good recurring gag.
An amazing recurring gag. It actually
I really like it.
I don't know how to phrase it exactly, but like
How much of acting is bullshit?
no. What it was so great to watch you just have fun with it. Like I just really enjoyed that aspect of the video, and I wondered what a video of yours would look like with that like tuned higher, if you know what I mean.
Ooh. Because obviously, like the animated stuff is like in little mini segments between everything else, isn't it?
Yeah.
Mm.
Because you're in your writing and like in our conversations and like everything that I've seen of yours, you're very, very witty, very funny, and like I wonder what it would look like if you just let it run free.
Literally do just like a piss take. I don't know, it's weird because I don't feel funny in everyday life. I think like I'm always struggling for cognizance, and I never think of the funniest thing quick enough. I think that maybe that's why I ended up being a writer, because I can take my time to be witty. Because I need time to be witty. But you've said that. It's an interesting thing. I also, like, looking back on it, I don't know whether it was deliberate or not, but there is, like, it is a bit of a piss take of most video essays, because, like, someone always shows up on camera and talks to you about a thing, and I can't, like, unsee the weird awkwardness of people from the 50s who didn't really know how cameras or television worked yet, talking directly to camera. And obviously you and I don't like show up on camera either, so in part it's almost like a weird commentary on that. But
Yeah.
I do, like, in my head think, oh, that's a character that could come back again, or like a secondary channel pops up and it's all just presented by him. It's like weird and deluded from this twisted Lynchian other world in which he's commenting on movies there. If I had the time and the energy, I probably would do that. But it's interesting, like you saying I had fun with it, because it was one of the most difficult ones to do, mainly because I was really struggling to put it together. Like, it's trying to do several things, like be an explainer video, which is secretly just about character, but also about faceless characters and the Khuleshov effect, but also with an animated character in it who's presenting, but also it's about what he's actually saying. You know, all that stuff was hard to work out and make work together. But also, like, animating that fucking mouth. It was tough. Every syllable by eye and by hand.
That's terrible.
Yeah. And I don't know, like, he's on screen for like 2 minutes and 30 seconds, which felt like an awful lot at the time. But also, like, oh god, if I brought him back, I'd do it again. And also, the weird, awkward thing with that video is I had to edit all of the clips from, well, everything in order, but I couldn't put them inside the 4:3 film frame. I couldn't make them black and white or grainy. I just had to edit the raw, then render it, and then put it into another timeline.
That's crazy.
Apply the black and white and the grain and the thing, and then render that and put it into the background of Ben's shots, so I could synchronize his audio exactly to the frame for the footage he was talking about. So I could decide on the timing of the footage that's playing behind him, as well as, you know, him speaking, but also the audio's all edited and finished already. So it was a big brain ache, to be honest, and I don't look back and think about it as fun. So I think the end result is funnier, but they always say like that comedy is funniest when it's miserable to make and harder to do. Oh, so that's my life then.
I guess at the very least, the takeaway might be whenever you have a comedic inclination, not necessarily to say like you have to go through that whole process to achieve it, but like if feel free to chase it whenever you so desire.
Yeah, I think some of my videos can be very humorless. Like, I don't think there are really many or any jokes in Amy Jump at all. But that's a whole discussion in and of itself. But yeah, it's weirdly one of the ones I'm proudest of. I suppose, like, my only hang-up about it is that it doesn't, like, the vibe of it, the general mood of it, doesn't really fit with The Mandalorian. It doesn't really fit with the thing it's talking about. But it's still worth watching, and it's not really. It's about the general subject, isn't it? I don't know. I'm still like a bit hung up on how well it matches with that.
It's always hard afterwards, especially when like, it's very interesting with videos where you're doing more than one thing at a time. Like we were saying earlier, how no wonder the simple ones are so many of them because it's so easy. I think when you're doing multiple things at once, it's easy to perceive that something in there has gone wrong. But I also think that the end result might be better almost always.
Yeah, because it challenges you, doesn't it? It like forces you to like justify every decision you've made, and you sort of realize what has to stay in and what has to be taken out. Yeah. What's like you're saying about your earlier process of like both like you and your partner in crime, like discussing things, and I'm like, that's the golden bullet for creativity. Making two people talk about it, the thing, whether it's a script or whether it's different departments or whatever. But if it forces you to talk about it, then you realize you actually have to format your idea for another person sitting opposite you, and they get to call you out on stuff that doesn't work, and then you drop that. So it's always great for stuff like that, and it's much harder doing it by yourself. But the harder something is, the more you ask yourself, is this worth it?
Yeah.
And like, ultimately it was. Yeah. Yeah. So I do like Khuleshov quite a lot. It's nice and weird, and it was fun making a character and everything. Although I'm a little bit more torn about my more recent video. I'm a little Amy Jump. It's a rough one for me. Let's be honest.
It's interesting because whenever I watch your stuff, it always feels like I'm learning something. A lot of things actually. Like I don't want to say too much, but like a lot. It almost feels like every video is something that needs to be watched more than once because there's a lot to take out of it.
Yeah. That's not accident.
And after I watched this one, I was like, there isn't a topic you could give this guy that he couldn't do. There's a lot of times when I find myself either approaching a topic or considering a topic, and like I'll research and eventually I'll find some kind of answer, but I'm like, I don't know if I actually have the ability to discuss this in like a meaningful way that I can reach a level of not mastery, but like seemingly so, and then package it lower and have people understand it. But I think you could.
Oh, yeah, but how much is that? How much of that is a grift? Because I get to choose what I talk about, right? I choose not to talk about things I don't really know.
True.
I don't know. It's weird. I mean, it's like I said, it's like two halves of my brain is like operating on like the basest assumptions and thoughts, and then the other half is trying to pull it up a bit, and I never feel I get it up all the way. But I mean, I did make a decision very early on that I'm not going to just make whatever to throw out every week or 2 weeks. I did want to make something like that's worth the time and the pain it takes to make it. And as a result, there's a lot of stuff that rewards rewatching. And by the way, there are Easter eggs in everything. I think everything. Certainly on my main videos. Stuff like you in DeFoe, when the cow lands on everyone, you can see where the cow takes off. Like a minute earlier into the video or something, you can catch that. And like the opening of Amy Jump is like a YouTube channel, but it's like I've given like joke names to all my own videos and more. I haven't even listed them all. There's a little something somewhere in everyone. So it is meant to like reward rewatching, but I also think like anything that you write properly does as well. Like I don't know for sure how many people watch Khuleshov and like knew that each beat I explain is also one that happens to the character presenting it. I don't know, but you just got to trust that people feel it and then go back and watch it again.
Yeah.
Or watch it at all, because this is YouTube. A year in, so it might all be madness.
I think that's YouTube's purpose.
Yeah, I mean, you do look at people who are really succeeding, and then you realize that they're all talking about burnout, and which is particularly weird for me because obviously that's like my condition in a nutshell, and I've like been trained to self-observe and understand what taxes you and what doesn't, and when to reserve and when not to go too far, and to keep an even balance and all this stuff. But you apply that to like the demands of most like YouTubers who are putting stuff out every 2 weeks or a month, and you realize, oh, that's not good for their health either. But it's a system in which only the people who do that get the algorithm to boost them enough. And maybe that's why there aren't that many disabled YouTubers. But it's also why people don't like write and rewrite things to a very granular degree. I think I've seen an awful lot of stuff of people just like talking improvisationally for like 40 minutes. And like, you could make that point in 10 minutes if you wrote it. But it's all incentivized by the way the whole thing works, and I know several things I have chosen to do won't really be treated kindly by the algorithm anyway. So who knows? But it's like you said about the disability video, I suppose, that you like just wait on that one to be found, I guess, because it is, and just make stuff worth rewatching.
Yeah, I think that's the way it has to be approached, where it's the idea that you had, you chased it exactly to where you wanted it to go, or as best you were able to, and you have a product that I don't know, lives on as long as you can be proud to. Yeah.
I mean, it's I mean, I'm a bit down on the last video I did. I mean, like, I'm very happy with like all the mini reviews I do of all their films and stuff, and it does have a payoff. But it's kind of weird. I was very sick when I made it, and I think the longest time I went without uploading anything was that in the previous video, which was like a shit post. The Snyder Cut joke. But and you can hear it in my audio. I think I have a friend who knows me and my condition very well, and she was quite upset listening to my voiceover because she could tell how ill I was for the first half.
Right.
But weirdly, despite that being a moment where I didn't feel that up to the video, and I think the video suffered for it, I'm more excited for the next one than I've been for any of the previous ones, really.
It's amazing.
Yeah, I'm doing Superman next, and I'm feeling really good.
I know I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I really can't wait. Do you want to talk about your stuff? Because I do.
Yeah, we're here. We might as well take part.
Right, because I've written a list. I'm really happy to do it. Like, I think it's weird. It's like one of your earliest videos that it might still be my favorite, is your Link's Awakening video.
That's interesting.
Because it's like, I mean, obviously, like, I love that game. I love that series. And I just I watched it again this morning, actually, and it's like, I don't think I would do anything differently if I made it, and the thought had occurred to me, like, and the references to Twin Peaks and the production history of it, and the weird, sort of like a really wonderful weird mashup of a very obscure, well, kind of obscure game of the time. And you just like string it together really well, and you establish the characters involved in making it, and the game itself, and its points of reference, and you dip in and out really nicely, and you intercut really well. And part of me goes, I think that might be my favorite video of yours.
Oh, I'm glad you like it. I certainly poured a lot into that one. I actually spent money on it. The voiceovers that you hear are people. It's like a guy I hired on Fiverr, and I tried to get him to do readings in sort of 3 different voices.
Mm.
And the art that's in it, that's I have a friend who's a webcomic artist, and I paid him to draw those as well. And I don't know, I was trying so much on that one where I tried to time it with the re-release of Link's Awakening on the Switch.
Of course, yeah. No, I got that. My birthday and everything. Yeah.
And
well, it's very smart. It really did pay off.
I got like I didn't just listen to I spend a lot of time on like the music for videos, and I made like this playlist of potential Zelda songs to use that was like over 100 tracks long.
Zelda music is so good, and a lot of it you can get around copyright. I mean, it's kind of a dream playlist to build.
It was interesting. I watched it again yesterday because I was like, well, I guess I should refresh since I haven't watched it in a while. And like you were saying before, like all I see are the flaws in it. There was a guy on Reddit, I think, who commented on it. He said that I went too long in my asides, and like the Twin Peaks part, and I think the discussion of the earlier game. And I think at the time I had this idea that I just wanted to explore the stuff that was related to it.
But for me, that's the most interesting stuff.
Oh, well, then I guess it depends on who you ask.
Like, objectively, it's not even a matter of opinion. You can just tell him he was wrong. But it was the interesting stuff for me in that video was because I only watched Twin Peaks this year, and I watched it all, the old stuff and the new, in a period of a couple of months, and sort of piecing in my head together all the stuff it inspired that I never realized it inspired, and that being one of them. But even watching the video, I had no idea there was a pre-existing game with that art style, or anything, or that's the character who shows up in the game. And I played that as a kid and never knew that was a reference to anything. But for me, like, that video, it's about the asides. Like, what else do you say about the video game other than it plays well? Because every Zelda game plays well. And it was more interesting you basically going through everything it came from. Other games, other media, and its creators, and their history as well. And those insights, those quotes you chose from the creators, were really interesting. I now can't get it out my head, the idea of like that young creator going up a hill and finding a lake, stuff like that. I was playing Breath of the Wild the other day, and I couldn't unthink that. So feel free to tell him with authority that was bullshit.
That's interesting, because I'll really have to think about that then.
Yeah, although I feel marginally left out by not getting to voice the tablet found at the ancient temple.
Oh man,
being British, we have a monopoly on these things,
If I'd known you at the time.
Yoli exposition. You'll have to make it up to me.
I will. It was weird to record myself because like you, I don't really mess with audio that much. So I was like, how do I do this?
Yeah, I mean, it's the one thing I don't have any experience in, and I also think YouTubers aren't drawn to it because we're inherently visual people. So, and I think it's different sides of the brain. Like, I have a friend who's like almost a savant music guy. And he like came running up to me like one day and when we were much younger and said, "You'll never guess what happened to me last night. I had a mental image." I said, "What?" He says, "No, I managed to imagine an image in my head." I was like, "Dude, that's me all the time." He says, "It's alien to me." And I said, "Well, what goes on in your head the rest of the time?" He says, "Oh, sounds I've never heard before." I sort of go, "What? You can imagine music? I can't do that." So it's that reminded me there is a very big separation between people who are visual and audio based, and I'm not one of the audio people, but I still think you're better with your audio than I am with mine. I struggle to find music. I struggle to edit to music, and I wish I was better at it. What can I say?
It's really interesting. I appreciate that feedback. It'll give me a lot to think about, actually, because I can't tell you how many times I look at what I'm doing in a video, and I actually view, like, I'm pleased with how the video turned out for Link's Awakening, but I sort of view it in terms of, like, what I had hoped it would do as, like, a failure. And you can actually see on my channel after that, I almost abandoned what I was doing there. Completely.
I have noticed a difference.
Yeah, and
kind of mourned it a little bit. I think that's exactly the sort of thing you should get back into. Because think of like the variation you can have in the space of one video. You analyze the influences that went into making it, from the creators to other media they liked to previous entries in the series. It never gets boring, and it's always interesting, and there's so much to talk about.
I will think about it then. I mean, it's kind of like
competing for my favorite.
Oh, that's good to know. Glad we had this conversation.
And that's just number one on the list. The next one is the core, because my dad, after my parents separated, my dad and I and my sister, we had this thing that there was a shop just down the road that you could rent DVDs, and every week we'd go and rent something. If there's nothing you wanted to watch, well, you're fucking coming home with something and we're watching it. And one of them was the core, and it must have been like the year it came out on DVD or something. And it's just like such a loving ode to like ridiculous cinema, because the mood of that film is surprisingly knowing. Like, it knows what it is. It's why it hired Aaron Eckhart as the lead, because he's very hard to use because he's so weirdly earnest to the point where you don't know whether he's being serious or knows it's a joke. But like the core is a very like great like 50s B-movie premise. We gotta drill to the core of the earth to restart the turning of the core. And you just clearly love it so much, and you lay out like the argument for why we need movies like that, because things have been weirdly dour recently in movies, I think.
Yeah, and I really enjoyed like just making that one. I think it was kind of like in a weird little space. After Link's Awakening didn't really do exactly what I hoped, I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna do whatever I want. And like, I don't care how I do it. I don't care what the approach is. I'm just gonna do whatever. And this one ended up being fun. Like, everything was fun. The music was fun.
Yeah.
Just like, I decided to do a little research to like figure out if there was any particular history behind the way it was. And by looking at the other disaster movies and watching them, and they were hilarious. Like the B movie, oh man. There were so many clips from that B movie I would have loved to have used.
Yeah, I mean, you there's like an endless resource of stuff like that. That's great to write. But I think the thing that sums the film up for me is that it's actually really good at opening with stringing you along on curiosity. Isn't it like a young trio of people going in for a job interview, and then one of them drops dead, and then only later do you realize it's an EMP and it's killed everyone's pacemakers. And then you sort of pan out onto the street and there's all these dead people, and you sort of go, a lot of fucking people have pacemakers in that town. Jesus, what are they eating? And obviously, like, pacemakers don't like immediately kill you when they start working, but it's such a great like in for this ridiculous plot, and they play it up just enough so that you kind of know the movie you're dealing with. And Aaron Eckhart is there, and he's got like the peach on on a fork, and for some reason there's spray in this UN like review stand or whatever, and he starts burning it, and it's like exactly everything that should be adapted from a 50s B movie that I feel we should keep. And I'm just so glad that was your take on the film as well, that it's joyful to be silly. And of course, Stanley Tucci is just like the best.
Oh my God, he can do anything. It was just fun watching him. And I think he helps,
Yes.
keep everything not. I think he helps with layers, right? Like you can have anyone doing whatever they want around him, and he sort of makes, he makes the highs a little lower and he makes the lows a little more closer to the middle because he's so functional.
Yeah, he's a colourful supporting character. That's what they're there to do. He also has the best payoff ever. He's just like sitting there rhapsodizing about his life, and then he just goes, "Fuck am I doing?" And then he dies laughing. I just think like. Perfect, like great.
Yeah, once I saw like what the movie was doing, I was like, oh, this is just fun. I was like, I didn't have to criticize it anymore. Plus, it helped that my friend was like, I love this movie. I'm like, what does he love about it? I'm like, oh, I get it.
Like how many times has that happened to you, where like someone tells you how much they love a movie that you either didn't care about or actively disliked, then you rewatch it with them or with their eye. And then you find things in it where you go, oh my God, this is actually brilliant. And I think it's almost worth the topic of a video. But it's like the company you keep really affects what you're watching. And it's why people who can find the joy in everything and not go, actually, the center of the sun, there are no empty caverns or spaces, and it's above 3,000 degrees Celsius. You just like that attitude will always ruin a movie, no matter how like serious it is. There is a point at which it shouldn't make sense, because if movies were like reality, then they wouldn't make sense, and they wouldn't be saying anything to you either. And I've always like really respected films that know their stories, that like know their pieces of fiction. I've always been slightly suspicious of films that try to pretend to be reality. And The Core is the best summation of that I can think of.
Yes.
Next on my list is The Departed. Show and tell. It's a good movie.
Interesting that you picked this one out. There's actually a couple of videos that I've done where I was trying to. They're like shorter than the others, and I think in this one in particular, I was just trying to make something quicker that I would be able to like work on something that was taking more time. Because I used to have a 2-week schedule, which I don't think was a good idea.
Same here, me neither.
And all I really wanted to talk about was that one scene where he's reflecting about his mother, or like he's in her house, and then we see him go to the apartment with that guy and get the ducky thrown at his head, and all this while he's
great use of contrast.
Yeah, all this while he's in the his meeting with the psychologist. Like I filtered the whole video from that. I was like, well, how does this extend into the rest of it, where I can kind of like draw a line through what the film is doing and what makes this scene work so well. And I always wonder about these videos where I'm basically just describing things that are happening in the frame. People want to watch that?
Well, I mean, like you said, it's about like finding what you're saying, and when you find one scene that sums up your argument or what the film's about, then it actually becomes a really useful tool, because every time you talk about a literal thing that's happening, you're also talking about the ongoing theme. And by talking about both, that each is made better by the other's association, and that you realize that when you're talking about the literal thing in that shot, you're also talking about the general way the movie works, and that's the subtext for it. And I think, like, especially doing a short video, that's like the best premise. Like, I don't think like a 40-minute video on the core would work, but the fact that you do it in 5 minutes is nice and light and breezy, and no one's padding anything, and it's about the fun of it. And like The Departed as well, like that scene especially, because it intercuts. So he's in therapy, and you see him like actively mourning over his mother, and that it's showing and telling, and certain scenes just show and certain scenes just tell. But it's like the use of the intercut. And I think like trying to make everything more condensed and shorter always makes a video better, and that's how films operate as well. And if you find a scene that sums up the film, it's great and perfect. Like my favorite detail in that scene in The Departed, when he's got his mother's stuff, is that you can see he's packaged all her stuff up and then ripped it open again. So he's like tried to put her away, but he couldn't help, and he just had to get it back and tear it open and like experience her again. Like, it's little details like that that really make it fly, because it was based on a Chinese film.
Yeah, it's
Internal
a Chinese
Affairs
film called Infernal Affairs. Yeah,
Infernal Affairs. Okay,
and made a sequel to it. It plays very differently.
Yeah, but I feel that like Scorsese makes The Departed as good as it is because they basically take some solid bones, and it's all about adding in the little details, and they add in all this like context of very specific cultural stuff, like the South Side and all that stuff, and the fact that DiCaprio's character lived alternately in the rough part of town and the posh part of town, which is kind of a metaphor for him as a double agent, and the fact that like Martin Sheen actively uses that. So it's like, did you have different accents there? Well, you're good for the job. But it's also like what the whole story of the film is. It's like people who are cops acting like criminals, and it's just it's good. And I wouldn't shy away from doing shorter stuff, but I also wouldn't shy away from doing like 25-minute Legend of Zelda stuff either. I suppose you can see that in whatever I do, is that I try to do short stuff sometimes, and I try and go a bit deeper on other stuff. And I think it's just about keeping it like a varied thing, so our audiences don't get bored.
Good to know. Good to know.
Yeah, my next up is Lego Batman.
Yeah, again, interesting you picked this one. It was actually I started making videos. I had like 4 or 5 or 6 finished, so that I would be able to keep on schedule, and if anything bad happened, it would just help to have stuff already done.
Well, I did too.
And this one was actually the 4th video I released, but I ended up having to delete it and repost it because I tried to edit it using the YouTube editor, and I screwed it up because I think I got a copyright claim.
Copyright. Content ID strikes again.
Yeah. And again, like I shared this one on Reddit, and it did much better originally. Someone had said that there wasn't really a need to kind of explain what was going on in Lego Batman because the movie does such a good job of explaining it to you. And then I looked at all the work I was doing, and it was kind of like, it's all kind of like that. So,
well, you can make that argument at any point, really. I think that the thing that like caught my attention was that you were sort of describing how villains work. Like, it is a villain's job in any screenplay to make, to really like pressure the hero and their weaknesses or their core psychological flaws and all that stuff. Because like my first thought was that if I did that video, I'd be like, I'd start with The Dark Knight and make it dark and grim and scary, and then just say, here's how Lego Batman works in exactly the same way. And I think it's interesting that you broke that, because I think people don't generally look at like kids films or even just lighter hearted stuff and like extol the virtues of how it works because it's more irreverent. But actually the same amount of time and work goes into Lego Batman and writing it really well as goes into The Dark Knight and writing that really well. And they're far more similar than people give it credit for. And I think like people are a little embarrassed when Batman gets a bit lighter, and I kind of think that's part of the character. And I think the video you did talking about Lego Batman is kind of reinforces that idea that actually it's as difficult and as complex every time to make a good villain.
Yeah.
But the prime like objective for that film is like the humor and not like the grim angsty darkness. And it's just nice to see someone take it seriously. Saying it's doing a great job.
Yeah, because in my mind might actually be doing the best job. I think there's always going to be arguments about, the Dark Knight versus Mask of the Phantasm, and honestly, versus Lego Batman as well. Like, I don't think we've ever seen Batman addressed this way before.
No, and I agree with like the Grant Morrison take on the character. Is like every period of history, from Adam West to Christopher Nolan, it's like all him, the character, and whenever he writes Batman, you can see he's as adept at writing the fun and the breezy and the ridiculous with like the grim and serious, because that's both parts of the character. And it's a very weird thing to sit back and, especially as like a script editor, and look at like what Batman films are just structurally the best or the neatest. And like Lego Batman's like number 2 on the list. I mean,
Yeah.
It gets plot better than The Dark Knight Rises does. And I like The Dark Knight Rises an awful lot. Maybe because it's about pain and people with chronic pain. But Nolan does stall the engine on the plot in the first hour. Batman finds his soul again and gets in the suit and is immediately crippled again, and then the movie takes like an hour longer. So it's very weird to like watch Lego Batman and realize just how streamlined it is, and it doesn't actually fluff any plot elements at all. And the fucking Condiment King is in it, and Crazy Quilt. It's just it is a nice reminder that it's actually as tough to be irreverent as it is to be serious.
Yeah, and economical, as you were saying.
Yep. Never overstay your welcome, which is a really good lesson for anyone who's writing anything. Next on my list was The Bachelor, which is one of the only ones on my list that I haven't actually. Yeah, because I haven't seen The Bachelor. I've never ever watched an episode of it. But when I watched your video on it, I was like, I feel it. I like it's just that weird kind of. It's like trash reality TV is surprisingly sophisticated in the way it plays with your brain.
Yes.
And I'm like a weird, for no reason at all, I'm a weirdly big fan of like Gordon Ramsay's TV stuff. Mm-hmm. And every time we watch, it's a very different experience watching the British version of Hotel Kitchen Nightmares and the American version of Kitchen Nightmares. They're very different things. But by watching both, he's the controlling element, and you can see how differently things are produced in America as they are in Britain, and it's very, very different. But Americans, with their reality TV, have like made this finely tuned femtosecond editing that plucks your brain and plays it like a one-armed bandit to such a specific degree that it works on like anyone. Even if, like me, you haven't seen The Bachelor, or you don't care, or you don't like any of these people, it's so good at forcing your brain down the alley it wants you to. It's really kind of impressive. I mean, it's almost like I don't agree with it philosophically, but have to appreciate how powerful it is. And you start talking about the way you can tell what's going to happen in the show based on how the intros are edited. And I think that's a very specific editor's brain thing. But it's about how you can simultaneously see the mechanisms of the way it works and be completely earnest about how it makes you feel. And that's why I had to bring it up, because you balance those things so well and you're very honest about both of them.
Yeah, that was actually... I'm glad you saw that, because like that's why I made the video, because initially when I started watching the show, I was just enjoying it for the sake of what it was. I would get invested in these runner-ups, and I would have this experience of, I know from story, this is how you set this up. Like if I'm watching The Walking Dead and someone gives me a very earnest, beautiful personal story, they're probably going to die.
Yes, it's basically The Walking Dead. The Bachelor is The Walking Dead of reality TV.
It's a little too similar. But I would watch these edits for the runner-up, and I would think, "Oh, this is the person he's going to choose." And I would get to the end, and it would be the opposite, and it would just crush me over and over again. And I was like, "Why is this happening to me? I know how story works," and it was because I know that they were manipulating me, and it took me a while to figure out. So that's really all I wanted to discuss in the video.
Well, I think you absolutely nailed it, and it's like an observation about reality TV that not many people make. I suppose because like everyone goes, well, no one's going to click on a YouTube video about The Bachelor, but it's like I had this idea like a year or more ago. I haven't committed to it, but I wanted to do a video about something similar. I wanted to do a video about Hell's Kitchen because I was just looking at the setup they had, not just the intensity of the edit, but also like. They must have 14 cameras running, filming 2 kitchens without obstructing them live. And you sort of realize how like titanic an operation this is for everyone involved, and yet we always dismiss it as like trash. I'm not saying it plays your brain like trash, but it's also weirdly like titanic and impressive. And I felt like I've been waiting for someone to mention that somewhere on YouTube. And then you did it. You summed it up perfectly in just a few minutes.
Well, thank you. I would love to see your Hell's Kitchen video.
I don't know if I'm ever going to get around to it because I don't give a shit. There are things that interest me more. Is that really about storytelling? Kind of, but I don't know. I've done some research on it, and it's fascinating. Like people just, apparently, if they've been on Hell's Kitchen, they don't mention it on their CV because it doesn't do them any favors. And there's like one military guy who was horribly sexist because he'd obviously been goaded into it, and he had such an anger problem that he got fired. He got dishonorably discharged for all the horrible things people like kind of egged him into saying on the thing. It's just, it's really interesting, but I don't know if it's going to supersede anything else I'm doing soon. So I suppose we'll have to see.
Maybe 5 years.
What did you like feel? What did you feel when you were going to post that? Because like I would be shaking in my boots, hoping that there's an audience for it.
Well, I know Bachelor Nation is a real thing. Like it's a community all in itself. So I wasn't too concerned about whether or not it would find an audience. I know that there's Bachelor people out there. So like there's a subset there. And then because of all the Sailor Moon videos that I've done, I don't know if this is true for the channel as a whole, especially not anymore, but it was something like 70% of my audience was women. So I was like, I don't think the Venn diagram of Sailor Moon and anime necessarily crosses over The Bachelor, but if I was going to guess, I'll just do it anyway because someone might appreciate it. And someone, I think I was talking to a friend also recently, while I was making it, and he had made some comment about, don't just pick the popular stuff, Sean. Do what your heart wants. And I was like, yeah.
I believe. Yeah, that's actually. I've got a little bullet point on one of my flashcards to mention something similar, but later in the roundup. I think what we should move on to is your West Wing video, which is a glorious epic.
Yeah.
How long did that take you to do?
I think it was like 4 months. I'm not sure. The first problem was I actually hadn't finished watching the series. I had only watched the first 4 seasons, so I had to finish watching that first, which took a while.
I bet it did. I could almost feel the hours you put into it as I watched it, but it was it's really interesting to see, like, at length, a breakdown of a show that, by the way, I've never seen. But Aaron Sorkin's always an interesting question. But I think it's like the longest thing you've done. Is that right?
For sure. So
Yeah.
what happened was, at some point, Lady Night the Brave. I've mentioned her before.
Oh yes, no, you did. You sent me a link, and I watched her Doctor Who thing. Yeah, no, she's great, isn't she?
I follow her on Twitter, and she said this thing. She's like, someone had recommended her to do a video, and she's like, these things take me like 3 to 4 months to make, and
Yeah.
broke my brain. I was like, we can actually do that? Like, we're allowed? Like, when I made my 2-week schedule, I was like, well, it's not 1 week and it's not 1 day, so this is the best I can physically do. And when she was like, it takes me 3 to 4 months, I was like, we can do that?
I know. I remember finding that out. I think like H Bomber Guy stuff. It takes bloody ages to put stuff out. Part of me questions like, oh my god, how is that possible? I mean, usually the answer to that question is they're a Twitch streamer and they have a lot of income through that way, or they have a job. It is an interesting question. I think, like, in your brain, interesting things happen when you say, this thing I'm going to spend 4 months doing, this thing I'm going to do in 2 weeks. Because that sounds just like it's about the runtime of the thing, but actually, I found at least, you write it so differently, knowing that from the outset. And I could tell that you were indulging in all the aspects of it, to the point where it's not so much about like making a definitive statement about the show as a whole. I mean, you have your premise and your pitch for it, but I would say that wouldn't work unless you'd spent the time looking at the characters and the way they're written and the way they change. And I think it's a really good affirmation for spending time on a subject at length, because it's not just about you made a very good video, but you made a video that was kind of that only works because you put the time in.
Yeah, it was an interesting process, because like I wanted so much for it. I wasn't just trying to take a stab at the deep dive. I was also trying to do After Effects at the same time, which I hadn't done before, and I also kind of wanted to like draw a parallel between America, and it's kind of like draw like a line through like the state of America as it was, look at American history, and then try and combine that, even though you realistically may not be able to, with the message of hope that the West Wing tries to convey. And it was just such a broad topic. Like, I don't know. There was actually a whole segment on the Great Depression that like I fully edited. Like I did everything. FDR's in there. There's some great quotes. As in terms of like thematically concept, it all worked well together. But when I watched it, I think there was a certain emotion that I was going for in the final parts of the video that the Great Depression part was segmented between. And it just needed to be removed, because I built up this emotion, and then this was kind of like a history lesson, and then I lost it all, so I just deleted it.
And also, like, emotionally doing that, talking about rising optimism, but also cutting back every time to like a period of misery or just academics. It like a feeling is something that runs through a video or a piece of media. It's not something you can just resume. So I can see that, like shooting down this rising feeling of optimism you have in that video. It's an interesting lesson, isn't it? And whilst, like I said, the video is as good as the stuff you take out.
Yeah, it was a lot of work. I don't think I would necessarily do it again, but I'm definitely proud of how it turned out.
I was just going to say, it's like number 2 or 3 on my list of my favorite videos of yours.
Thank you.
Earns its place.
Yeah, and it's I'm sure you've experienced this, especially when you're working on something a little longer. Like I hadn't actually, I was building the episode for like, I don't know, a couple weeks or a month, and I hadn't actually watched it all the way through. So I didn't know if it was working. And then I watched it when I had built like maybe 40 minutes of it. I was like, I don't know if this is working. And then, and then I got near the end and I watched it. I was like, oh, okay, thank God it does.
Yeah, no, it does. I mean, I've been in those moments before when I think it's going to be, oh God, it's not going to work. But then it does pay off in the end. I just think of all the shows to sort of go in deep and dive on is like The West Wing specifically, because Aaron Sorkin to me is one of the best working writers. But for me, especially as not an American, like looking for the philosophy of a lot of American stuff is that I always feel like quite conflicted about a lot of stuff and what they put pride in and what they ignore and all that stuff. But Aaron Sorkin's weirdly been like a very earnest person who is optimistic, but his stuff is all about a lot of very sharp conflict at the same time. And the fact that he wrote something about like a president in the White House, you sort of go, oh well, it's not reality, but it's not about, the point isn't the reality of what that character would be. It's more like what's the message you're sending to America and all that stuff. And
what the conflict is between the characters themselves and what they're trying to do.
yeah, because the goal is like the optimistic outcome, and they're all struggling towards that together, which is kind of a lot like Star Trek, I think. Gene Roddenberry said, "No personal conflicts. Like there is tension and difference, but it's all about the goal that they're united in striving for, and that's something that you don't see in British media at all." Mm. Do you think like being a Canadian gave you a different point of view on it?
Yeah, I have to assume maybe a little bit because I'm essentially detached from it. Like I didn't grow up with American ideals, and I have to assume that makes me a little different in some respect in terms of how I view it. But at least in terms of how I've talked about it with other West Wing fans, or at least people who have made comments on it wherever I shared it, it seems that the perspective on America matters less to real West Wing fans than the characters do, which I think is basically how Aaron Sorkin works, right? Like, yes, he is making commentaries on larger ideas and themes, but his work is character first, and that's where the true interest lies. Because if that doesn't work, nothing does.
Yeah, but it's also like it's like the driving seat of a theme is you find a character that personifies that, and you have to make them real, and he always does. But I thought it's very interesting comparing that to like The Social Network, which is like a weirdly pessimistic film, and also arguably about America, just not in a political way, more of a like capitalist way maybe. And he gets character right every time, and it's the sort of thing that he's never rewarded for, because he's known for like witty, sharp, funny dialogue. But it's in little tiny plays, like, Zuckerberg hits enter and the site is live. And, Savrin's like, you have no idea how much this will mean to my dad. And like Zuckerberg is paused for a bit and he goes, are you praying? And, little tiny little blind stitches like that, which aren't like broadly celebrated. But it's like character's the thing, and Sorkin gets it right every time. It's just, I think people assume he's all about the dialogue because that's the most obvious thing he does. And I noticed that you hadn't made a video about how good the dialogue is. It's about the characters.
Yeah. I think that's because that was just my overarching takeaway from the show, so I didn't necessarily focus on it as much. And plus, I probably naturally shy away from things that people have said before, just in general. Yeah. If I think someone said something, I know you're the same. You're like, oh well, what's the point of me saying it then?
Yeah, definitely. It's great. It's really great. Yeah, it's almost a shame you don't do any longer form stuff, but it's all about the thing you're talking about, I think, because it's like, would you really do an hour or more on one 90-minute movie? But given a TV series, that's kind of begging for a longer form thing.
Yeah, which is why, I thought a TV series would be a perfect way to kind of like try it out.
Well, okay. I wouldn't dissuade you from doing something longer again, but 4 months is rough. It is. Right, and I suppose that brings us right up to your most recent video, Super Smash Brothers.
Yes.
What were your feelings going into this?
So once I started doing the longer form stuff, my plan was like, I'm going to do this moving forward. Like, this is all I'm going to do. And as I started working on it, I think I started to realize that it might not necessarily be for me. I mean, I could be wrong about that, because it could just be. I find sometimes when I'm exploring something new and I'm struggling to do it, I get kind of frustrated, and it makes me think that I don't like what I'm doing. But if I just wait a little longer, I might actually enjoy it. Like when I started doing YouTube videos in general, and like just working with Premiere Pro, I was so angry because I initially came from the writing world, where like I would have websites or blog entries or share on other people's sites where I would write first. Like that's where I came from. And the reason I made videos is because it seemed like people weren't really reading as much, and it was getting harder to get people to read. But I bet people would watch a video. And so I was just angry. I was like, oh, I'm only doing this because people don't read. And like, it's taking so long. But now, like, I enjoy the process, especially since, I've learned how to use the software better and I know shortcuts.
Yeah, I mean, the moment you know the tools you have, that actually starts like generating ideas for all that stuff.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
yeah, the reason why I like Smash Bros. Much as I do is that, well, I mean, you tease up a nice visual metaphor which you pay off at the end, but the body of it is actually got a weird momentum to it, because you keep introducing new people, new players of the game, and then like building up like our expectations for how their career is going to go, because I don't know any of this. And then they play off against someone else, and then you see their backstory and what their fight will be, and the ups and the downs of all that stuff. And you leapfrog it end to end to the point where you're always engaged and following whoever it is you're talking about. You also establish like the history of it really well. It's like the N64 is the thing that I played that on, and then later the GameCube, and like I had no idea this was still it was still a thing. It was still a tournament thing. But I just like it's like I was a manic fan for exactly the amount of time I watched your video.
That's really nice to hear. Thank you.
I mean, you're really good at like getting the viewer to really buy into the enthusiasm of what it is you're talking about, and I think that might be why Smash Brothers is number one for me, because I invest in like your point of view of it so absolutely, starting from nowhere, having no relation to it beyond having played the game once. It might be tied for top one with Link's Awakening for me, but it's a good one.
Thank you. It's when I was working on it, I wanted it to be so many things. Like I wanted to go far more in depth with the different players, and I wanted to go. Have you ever heard of Tim Rogers or ActionButton.net?
Not in the least bit, no.
He makes these 3-hour videos about video games. He has this condition where he can remember everything that's happened to him since he was like able to have a consciousness.
Holy shit!
So he remembers every conversation ever, which means he remembers every name. He remembers everything. And what he's done is he sort of converted
Like my last girlfriend.
Are you making a joke, or did you actually have this?
No, I'm making a joke.
Okay, just checking. So he's been in games journalism for a long time, and I think he's somewhat credited in creating a new form of games journalism where you sort of talk about your personal aspect. So in these 3-hour long sagas, he'll tell these stories, and because he has perfect recollection, they become very interesting because he can break it down narratively and make it more engaging, like where he was, what he was doing, while at the same time making a very high level commentary about how games function.
That sounds incredible. You got to send me links to this.
Oh, I will. And that was in part one of my inspirations to do the video as well. I was like, I have a personal history with the N64 version, especially of Smash Brothers, and I want to be able to talk about it the way he does. And I also wanted it to be like an introductory video for someone like yourself who like might be a fan of mine, but they don't know anything about even just fighting games. At least they could follow along. And I wanted to set the stage so that if you so desired, it would be unlikely, but if you so desired to start following competitive Melee at this point, you now have enough storylines that you could do so and be like able to follow along.
Oh, so you're arming a potential new audience.
Yeah, but as you know, as I started to narrow my focus and I started to look at how big all these things were, I was like, it was two parts. One, I was like, I don't think I'm going to be able to make an interesting video if I do all this all the way, similar to how I would have done it for Zelda, for example. I need to really narrow it down to just, I'm talking to someone who has no idea what I'm talking about. So I have to really summarize and make it clean and move fast.
Yes.
So there was
it
like
works a treat.
Thank goodness. There's a sequence where it really helped in my process. Like as I was writing, there was a sequence where I was talking about how the tournaments work, because to someone who doesn't know what their tournament system is, it's actually quite complicated when you explain it in terms of like how the stocks work, how the games work, how the sets work, and how it all functions together. And I was writing it all out, and I like studied it and I researched it, and I got like 2 paragraphs in, and I was like, why bother explaining this? It's just going to slow things down. And I just deleted it all. It doesn't exist anywhere anymore.
It takes some balls, but cutting it down is great. But you do explain more than enough for people to get a good foot in the door of the subject matter, especially the way you sort of explain what Smash really was, and that's that it was coming out of a fighting game sort of generation in which, you know, very quickly excluded amateur players, especially kids. But Nintendo have always been pretty good at catering to a younger audience. Even if, as Mark Brown does mention, not for disabled players. But Smash was kind of like a really good example of something that took the slightly nastier competitive edges and turned it into something more interesting, because that whole percentage damage distance of flying thing, which I remember very clearly as a kid, I can't think of any other examples before or since. And also, like, I always felt like the games were like so much an evocation of like what kids do with their toys, and that's you get all these toys from different franchises. You know, you got Link and you got Mario and you got whatever, and you like cram them all together and you play with them, which is my theory as to why the final boss was a pair of hands. Yeah, because I did that when I was a kid. My toys would fight my hands.
That's exactly right. I think that's why in the intro in 64, it's like the hand comes around and it picks up the puppets and it sets the stage.
Yep. It's great, and you just like you slip right into it. And I think because of the context you establish, you certainly don't spend, you know, you don't outstay your welcome there, but you go into it in such a way that someone can literally start from nothing, understand it as you go, and get really into the competitive aspect of things. It's it's an overall, as an overall edit, it might be your finest job. Finest work yet.
I'm glad to hear it. Hopefully I can continue. It's actually, again, like, I think this will be another departure for me in terms of videos, where this is going to sound really weird to say, but I don't know if it had actually occurred to me before to make something interesting.
The human brain does work like that.
You know, like, I think I would think of an idea, and I think I would present it similar to how a teacher would, like, oh, well, this is what I want to do, and this is what I have to explain to get there.
Yeah.
I don't know if I properly made it interesting along the way. I was like, this is what this is supposed to look like, and like a lot of stuff would come from that. And sometimes, like with the core, I would have fun with it. But this, I think I'm going to think of things differently now. Like now, as I'm writing my next script, I'm like, well, what would be the most engaging way to do this?
Yeah, I think I see a lot of other people who do video essays kind of make the mistake of thinking like because they care about it, you should too, and they think like telling you they care is enough, and that's not the same as making like a viewer feel it, and you've got to play the audience like a film does. Weirdly, that's why I don't really write in a familiar, chummy way. It's because I think that gets in the way of like presenting an argument in an interesting way, and also just using all the tricks of like set up an expectation and then subvert it halfway through, or establish something completely alien at the beginning, cut into something else, and then realize that pays off at the end. And all that stuff that movies do, use that to make it entertaining. Because I think it's very easy to be dry with a video essay because people are just explaining their take basically, and like you can explain your take in a variety of ways, some of which could be really boring. But if you can identify like what makes you passionate about the video and the subject matter that you're doing, then you can start to like reverse engineer it and try and get an audience who may never have heard of it in on it.
Exactly. I think some of what I was doing before was in fact reverse engineering. I think maybe by accident I made it interesting.
That's my life. By accident, really interesting.
Yeah.
The next goal is to do it not by accident. That's the tough bit.
That's the tough bit. Well, maybe for the rest of our lives we can work on that one. But
yeah, and then we'll do this conversation again as 70, 80-year-olds trying to figure out what we fucked up and didn't.
Oh man, I can't look at any of it. It's all awful.
This is awful. I've wasted my life.
That'll be a great conversation. I look forward to it.
Yeah, I sort of visualize it taking place in like a Mad Max apocalypse, and we're just drawing images in the sand. I didn't really get the subscribers I was hoping for.
Did you see that guy's sand images? They're great. Good stuff.
So it's practice, kid. Oh boy. Well, at least we've got plenty of material to adapt for the apocalypse. I say we round off with lessons we've learned over the last year, although we kind of have been doing that along the way. I've got like 6 bullet points.
All right, you go ahead.
But do you want to alternate? I'll do one, you do one.
Sure. Yeah, that's a good
okay,
idea.
boom. You go first.
I think the first lesson I wrote down was this guy called Make Stuff. He's really into Jonathan, but I'm not sure. And I watched his video of The Last Jedi, and he has these sequences where he's doing like part 1, part 2, part 3, and like they're oddly long, like longer than most video essays I'd seen before. And right from there, I was like, oh, you can let things breathe and you can create sort of an emotion from that. And like before I even started this channel, I was like, that's something I'm going to take moving forward. And like from my very first video, it's there. I'm still working on it, but I think it's important.
Yeah, I mean, definitely link me that. But I think like I don't know how deliberate it was, but looking back over my stuff, it's like I think I'm always like trying to reach for an emotional endpoint. I mean, not so much like here's my take on this thing, but it's like what's the emotion behind it? And I think like it doesn't have to be simple. Like you mentioned like the ending of the Contagion video, and it's weirdly sort of melancholic in the way that everything I've been talking about for the last 15 minutes is kind of like undercut by this thing. And I was like, I remember watching that the first time going, I feel the feeling every time I rewatch it, even though it's a bit janky and visual and all that stuff. But I think that's like what I've always been reaching for ever since that, is like try and make each video sort of culminate in emotion. And you don't do that by making it hyper paced through and through, or even slow paced. I think it's about mixing it up and knowing when to like build up an emotion and then drop down to let it process.
Exactly.
That's great. My first bullet point is basically like be honest with yourself about what isn't working and change it. Because I think I went in feeling pretty rock certain about what I wanted to do, but actually in doing it and testing it out and giving it time and looking at it, I was like, oh, actually, no, I thought that would be perfect, but it's not working. And I think there's that instinct to double down on something that you are sure would have worked. But I think like being open to change, because like the premise of what my channel was, at least when I started, is very different from what it is now. And I think being fluid and receptive to your own flaws, but also your own positives, is the only way this works, I suspect.
Yeah.
It's very easy to watch like anyone now. Like, I don't know if you watch Princess Weeks' stuff. She's done a bunch of like comic books. She co-presents It's Lit with Lindsay Ellis. But she's got all her stuff up from like 8-9 years ago, and it's very different. And you know, she said it's all about the journey, but it is. And I think it's very easy to look at successful channels now and go, oh, I'll do that, and not realizing that, oh no, they're there now because of all the changes made along the way, and they were receptive to things that they weren't proud of. So that's my first lesson.
Oh, that's a good one.
You're up next.
I think this one was like a half lesson. That's what I wrote down, which is a strange way to phrase it.
I almost learned something.
I think, judging from some of the videos I've seen that do better than others, it's helpful to make something about make a topic that something people don't know. I find where if I'm just relating what makes something good, that's nice. But like if I'm actively showing, even if I think it's basic, like the Departed stuff, explaining something that people might not know themselves is helpful.
That is eerily similar to my next point, so let's just do it now. It's like that question of how obscure do you want to be, which gave me like a lot of anxiety at the time, because I thought like Journal of a Plague Year would be like nothing. I don't think anyone would have been interested in watching an animated 10-minute video about it, but it's been one of the most successful, most viewed videos on my channel. And I think that lesson to me was, if you like, don't choose not to do something because you think it's obscure, because if it is, there's very little content out there doing it. So you can like monopolize the market on a subject if no one else has talked about it. And in fact, what YouTube and everyone else tells you to do is follow popular subjects, which can be useful for pulling people in. But it's actually the obscure stuff which makes like you valuable. And I'd say like chase obscure every time. I don't think anyone was begging for like an Amy Jump video, but I did it, and I'm really glad I did. And some of the obscure stuff I've done is the most successful. I think that's partly like breaking the idea of all these things you're supposed to do, because so often I see so many channels just chasing what the hashtag is, and I'm like, I can watch a dozen videos by anyone on this subject and none of them are standing out to me. So I think it's that combination of asking like, what do I have to offer as a creator? Why do I deserve to be on here? In addition to that idea of actually, you don't have to do it all the time, but chase those obscure like interests, because chances are no one else has done it, which means you're first.
Yeah. Sometimes first is great.
Yeah.
My actual next lesson was the make it entertaining one. So we've kind of already covered that.
Yeah. I mean, it's a funny thing to have to remind yourself, but it is interesting to see how many people sort of get tunnel visioned about all the things they want to make something do. I'd have it all the time as a script editor, by the way. I mean, a lot of people who had like very high aspirations about like theme and meaning and philosophy and all that stuff. But I'm like, you're not grabbing their attention on page one, and there are no surprises in it. Like, where's the twist? And like, why is the shot opening on the face of that person and not this alien scene going on outside? And I think it's about execution really, and using those tools to keep people entertained, all fueled by the thing you ultimately want to end up doing. So I know it sounds like quite an obvious thing to say, but you'd be surprised the amount of very talented people that accidentally forget to be entertaining. Like Joseph Gordon-Levitt. I couldn't help it. I just
Poor man.
Okay, like my next bullet point is prioritize one's health. Now, I don't know how much this might apply to you, but you have kind of mentioned the fact that, you know, you're working on a 2-week schedule and the end result was a bit weird, but I actually think everyone has to think about like what they're doing and how it affects them, because I would argue it affects the content in a big way, and there's a very big difference between something that's had a very patient amount of development time on it versus stuff that is just churned out every 2 weeks. So like obviously for me, like I crashed after the disability video. I didn't upload anything for months. I still feel I've never really recovered from it yet. Lockdown and the pandemic hasn't helped. But I think like that's a really important lesson for other people, because burning yourself out does not necessarily, I mean, you may gain a bigger audience, who knows, but it isn't necessarily going to make your content worth watching. And like that's a lesson I'd share with everyone.
Especially not moving forward. Like, you can't keep going if you can't go.
It's the long game, really, because I'm here after a year, and funnily enough, after passing a year, by the way, a lot of my videos have suddenly gotten a big spike in views and impressions. So the year-long theory was correct.
Yeah. Keep it coming.
Yeah, but it's all about the long game and making sure you're doing it at your pace, because it's not just about how hard are you working yourself. It's actually about the end product as well.
I actually only wrote down 3 lessons, so I'm gonna off the cuff it.
Damn.
But one is that don't necessarily stick to one thing. When I put up my first Sailor Moon video, it sat at whatever views it had for a long time, for like a year. And then one day it exploded, and I automatically transitioned into creating another one about it that I'd sort of had in mind.
Yeah.
And it also exploded because it was so close to the other one. So that was great. But then I tried to make another one later on, and I think the idea was like, well, if I made one every so often, at least it can fund all the other videos. It was a lot harder to do. Like it was kind of like a subject that was recommended to me, and like I didn't choose it first necessarily. It was just like the next logical step, and like I really struggled with it.
But it's like a question that always comes up, isn't it? Because like anyone who looks through my videos can see, like I alternate between doing like short form content, some of which are just like trailer mashups, and some much longer stuff. And the typical advice is that you should sort of make your channel like a consistent thing. And I've ignored it. I think you've stuck to it more because you produce a lot of like consistently produce video essays. But I don't want that as an audience. I sort of want like a brand to buy into, because if you watch like Red Letter Media stuff, they do a whole bunch of different stuff, but it's always worth coming back to for them and their take. So I suppose I'm kind of pushing my chips forward on that. But if you look at any advice on algorithms and subscribers and audience members and all that stuff, it'll all tell you not to do that. That if you do something different, make another channel. And I don't always agree. I think like mixing it up is a really important part of it, and doing an unexpected thing that people wouldn't necessarily expect you to do.
Yeah, like even if it's thematically or structurally or conceptually different, it's
always good to have like a little tiny premise somewhere in your head that's different from what you usually do. Like it could be as simple as like do a video in black and white, or do one in one take, or make it under 2 minutes. You know,
Yeah, I mean,
little
there's
things
no,
like that give you
I think there's
ideas.
I really don't think there's any harm in that. I don't care what the algorithm people say.
I care a little bit. I mean, if they're agreeing with me, I'd care. But
Yes, I care a little bit too.
yeah, I'll just pretend not to for a while.
Yeah.
Until it's clear it's not working.
I guess for my next lesson, I would say sometimes, which is similar to what we were just talking about, actually, just sometimes throw out the script. Like that core video I made essentially was because I didn't think the Legend of Zelda one worked, and I was just doing literally whatever I wanted. And I think sometimes you do need to do that from time to time. You don't know where it'll take you.
Yeah, so you got to that from a completely different starting point, basically. That's really interesting. It's funny because some stuff that I've got coming up was based on like our conversations about that. That I sort of mentioned that the golden, you know, for screenwriting, the 90s were kind of golden age, and that they kind of were for novel writing too. And like based on your reaction, your interests to that, I decided to completely reformat it and basically, you know, for those viewers who are on tenterhooks, planning to do it like a trilogy of screenwriting, novel writing, and comic writing in the 90s. And that came from like a very different thing. That was originally going to be like a couple of minutes in a different video about someone else entirely. But that's why it's like good to have someone else with good taste who's a sounding board, because then they start to sort of tell you what the most interesting stuff you've done is, and you can pursue that more. So being fluid is great. And I like how many times have I mentioned so far stuff that wasn't in my plan or in my script that I just went with.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
The best stuff. I've my next point on the list I've kind of mentioned before is just like writing for your imagery and not just your script, and trying not to make the audio and the visual too separate. I've mentioned that, so my last point would be is like what people expect or want from YouTube. Because I've wanted to talk about this for a while, this idea that I think a lot of effort in a lot of big channels goes into looking slick, like looking as slick as like a professionally produced news segment would be, for example.
Right.
I feel a lot of other stuff suffers because of that, but like my advice or the lessons I stick to is that it's not really our job to be slick, because an audience can get that anywhere. It's our job to be innovative. Just be visually creative, try and do something visually different, because you can look at a lot of my stuff and go, oh, that's a bit visually janky, or that doesn't work. But the priority is not to be flawless, because minimalism is flawless, but it's minimal. But if you like push the boat out and do something a bit weird that like a video producer at a news channel would say no to, then actually people kind of come to YouTube to find stuff which isn't that wouldn't make it onto a television or in a movie. Yeah. And actually you can be as raggedy as you like if you're creative, and you'll still find an audience.
It's true.
Yeah. And I'd like to apply the same thinking to ideas as well. It's like, what wouldn't you get out of a movie? What wouldn't you get out of a TV program? And try and find like a take that wouldn't otherwise be had. That might be why like certain things like representation or stuff like that is kind of a growth industry on YouTube, because those are often people and subjects which kind of pushed out the mainstream. And I think independent media online from individuals can offer things that the mainstream doesn't. And I think there's sometimes too much of an addiction to making a thing look like a movie when you're offering like a watered down version of a movie.
Yeah, it's like creating a space for something that's not that. Well, we've seen these before. What else do you have for me?
Exactly. And I think if you only got slick expected mainstream stuff on YouTube, there wouldn't be a YouTube. And I think some channels feel the need to be more mainstream in that weird way, and I would say no, not as an audience member, and I like being weird has done me a lot of favors, so that's my takeaway.
Does for me. Like I appreciate it.
It's what I'm here for. It's what I'm here for. Well, I think like I come to the end of what looks like a shorter list than it felt, but I think we're done. I say we end on just teasing a couple of things that are coming up.
Sure. Who goes first?
It's a question, isn't it? I say you, because I want to know. You go first in all of these scenarios.
It's Godzilla. I'm getting pretty close to the end of the script. It's actually going to be something I think you'll appreciate, especially rewatching some of your videos. I'm sort of assessing the human characters in Godzilla movies and why they don't work.
Yeah, I like you mentioned it to me a while back, and I'm really interested. Although my first thought to you was Captain Christian. Like,
yeah, I gotta go
he's
back
the guy,
and
and it's like, I don't envy you your task, but I'm really looking forward to it because that's a great character to break down in many a different way. Is that all you've got planned? Because it's me, isn't it? I've got a fucking list as long as my arm of different stuff I'm working on in YouTube, one thing at a time. Is that the only thing you've got planned?
No, actually, I do have a plan to do like a Star Wars thing, and I wanted to do something on the Nice Guys, and for the Sailor Moon people, I was going to cover the anime called Revolutionary Girl Utina, which I haven't actually watched yet.
Well, neither have I, so don't worry. But I'm really looking forward to the Nice Guys. Because that's fucking great.
But I don't know. I think this Smash Brothers video and making things interesting is making me rethink everything. So I'll see. I'll probably still approach those topics and see if I can do it the way that I want to do it now. I think Godzilla will be like a good. I'm going to go back at like I'm essentially. I know we're always in the lab, but like I'm going to be in the lab for the next few videos, trying to like figure something out.
That's cool.
I'm not going to be too concerned about who they will appeal to or like whether or not it's going to be perfect because I don't know. We'll see. I get back in the lab.
I think that's a really nice condensation of a lot of lessons we've talked about so far, changing your approach. I don't really know how I'd be different in the next year, but I think like, well, my next video is officially going to be about Superman and his origins as a character historically and, you know, as a character. A certain take on him that I hadn't seen much before until you mentioned Jacob Geller's video on the Golem, and I got kind of mildly annoyed that he'd spoiled the take on him that I hadn't gone. But after taking a few days and then watching it, I realized that actually no, like his video is like very different from what I had planned and is like far more specific about a certain thing and a lot slower paced. So I felt like I've still got something to offer the subject matter. And that's the one I'm really excited about. Visually, narratively, it's not going to be too long. Really excited to do it. A draft of it's already written. I'm going to have another go at it again. So Superman's next. I'm really excited about that. But as I mentioned, the idea of doing a trilogy about the heyday of writing in the 90s and how it was weirdly an exciting time for complete unknowns to get ahead in every avenue. Like novelists had groupies back then. It's how we got like Tarantino and Kevin Smith. But also for comics as well. There was the Image Comics and the comics bubble. So I thought like that's a 3-part trilogy. Whether I do them one after the other or intermix them with other stuff, I don't know. I'm also planning on doing a video. It's kind of, I know what it's about, but the examples are two very separate things. And that's using Dune, the movie of which is coming out this year, and From Hell, because they both start off by giving you major story spoilers and then proceed to tell a story which is still great, despite having spoiled it for you. And I just thought that's such a rare thing in storytelling, but I saw it as a pattern that happened in both, that I really want to do a video about how spoilers aren't really spoilers.
Oh.
Which I'd not told you about. Ironically, it's the only video idea that I didn't spoil for you.
I think especially given like your other video work, I think that one's gonna be really interesting.
Could be. I'm still stroking my chin about the visuals, but I'm feeling good about it.
You're learning a lot in that one, I could tell.
Yeah, can I do it in 10 minutes though is the question. Oh, okay. Well, we're 3 hours and 10 minutes in. I think it's time to call it a day.
I mean, look at what I've accomplished. Do you see him? Do you think a depressed person could make this? No.